in, and hopefully that'll buy time for some of our missing members to join us. So how about we start with Sammy today? Sammy, how are you doing?
I'm good, other than it rained, which normally that's a good thing, but when you're in the middle of harvest, it's not a good thing. So
All right. Well, good to see you.
Cooled off. And yeah, like I told the department staff, I was there last night till the end of the meeting. I just didn't get promoted with my phone number calling back in, so we'll see how long this works today. But
all right.
I
Yeah,
didn't
sorry
drop
about
off,
that.
and I did have all the documents in front of me yesterday. I was a little frustrated by that public comment saying that we should, as several other people indicated in their checkout, like, you know, some of us try, we just don't live in the city where we have internet at will. And you guys' internet living in the city isn't great.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Sammy. Glad you're here. Good to see you. Katie, how are you doing after your first day?
Doing good. I'm looking forward to today, and yeah, one day closer to Friday for me, so also looking forward to that.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Diane.
I'm good. Felt good to get accomplished what we did yesterday together. Really am very appreciative of all of you.
Thank you, Diane. Tom.
Well, I don't know if I could say it any better than Diane. I sort of echo her comments, and just thank you all for the conversation yesterday. It was respectful, and I think we got some good things done. So hopefully we can replicate that today.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Steve.
Good morning. Doing well, and unlike Sammy, I don't have to worry about harvest, and so an August rainfall in Colville without any lightning and thunder is a very good thing in August. So kind of happy to see that, and it I don't know if it eases fire concerns, but it was good to have a little precip this morning.
Thanks, Steve. Morning, Bill. How are you today?
Doing good. Yeah, I'm sort of like Steve. I sort of appreciate that rain. Had a little excitement last night. We saw some smoke coming up nearby, and luckily we called it in, and they had 5 trucks on it within about 10 minutes and put it out real quick. So,
oh, good.
That time of the year. So any rain is appreciated. Sorry, Sammy, about your harvest, but we like the rain up here.
Thanks, Bill. Lynn, good morning. I see you. I don't know if you're working your computer, Lynn, but you're on mute. All right, I'm going to come back to you, Lynn. Candace.
I am well and looking forward to today.
Thanks, Candace. All right, let's see. Since we started, I don't know if Paula's on yet. Okay. I don't know if Jess is on yet. Okay. Dave, how are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. Our weather here, though, is dry and wind is blowing about 25 miles an hour. So it's just drying everything out. We would love to have a little rain.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. And just so you're aware, you're coming in faint. So I don't know if you need to be closer to the microphone, but just to let you know. So we'll keep you posted as you talk in the meeting. Trent, how are you doing?
Sorry, too many buttons. Yeah, I agree with Steve. Got a good night's rest. It's nice to wake up to some rain. After a really wet spring, it seems like we had quite a dry spell here. Seems like it's been maybe at least a month without rain. So it's good to get some rain. Hopefully that lowers the fire danger a little bit.
All right, thanks, Trent. Might as well ask Anne Marie right next to you there. How are you doing, Anne Marie?
Yep, I'm good. Unfortunately, we had our chicken killing raccoon escape from the raccoon trap last night. So that was kind of a bummer. We've been trying to catch it for a while, but the chickens are fine.
Okay.
So is the raccoon, so doing well.
All right. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Andy, I don't know if Andy's had a chance to join us. I don't see him. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to last because when I first got on, it was pretty bad. So anyway, I'm doing fine and looking forward to today.
All right, great, Lisa. Donnie, how are you today?
I am good. Good night's sleep, refreshed. Yesterday, I know a lot of you said this as well. It was very hard in terms of just the length of the day. I think I'm going to make sure to remember that in future kinds of virtual meetings if we have them. That it is for not doing anything, it's exhausting. Just the mental side of it. I also want to just acknowledge all of you WAG members. Part of appreciate the public input as always. Part of that I think was hard to hear in terms of representing everybody out there, and I just want to say that's a huge challenge to represent everybody that's out there. But I wanted to just support you all and acknowledge you do a heck of a job, and you're all working with your communities behind you. A lot of very detailed information, and those communities are also very diverse in how they feel. So I just wanted to kind of tell you that I appreciate you and that you do a good job.
Thank you, Donnie. Has Don DeShield joined us yet? I don't see him. All right, Dan Brinson.
All right, got it. Yeah, no, doing good. I was happy with the results of yesterday that we were able to push forward and check something off the list of things to do. As myself personally, I'm doing great. Been a grandpa now for about 2.5 months. Loving that.
Hey.
Yeah, so all
All
is
right.
good.
Good, Dan, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Little girl.
Wow. All right, thank you. Dan Paul, good morning.
Morning, Rob. Morning, everyone. And yep, good to be here. Tired up here today, but it's a good day. So.
All right, thanks, Dan. Just to let you know, you came across real faint, so we'll let you know if that continues when you participate. All right, see Paula. I think I see you joined us.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I was a few minutes late, so I assume we're in the middle of checking now. But I'm doing fine. Had good night's sleep and happy that it rained last night. Good for the garden and my forest. So yeah, good and looking forward to the day. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paula. And Jess, good morning.
Hello. Everything's good. We're ready to get to work, I guess.
All right. No, that's all right. Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. Okay, so I think we're missing Nick, Andy, and Don.
Don is here. He needs to be promoted. His last 4 is 0165.
All right. There we are. Don, how are you today?
So far, so good.
All right, thanks.
It's early.
Thank you, Don. And then we'll keep an eye out for Greg and Robert in case they're able to join us. All right. So
Rob, did you go back to Lynn?
Oh boy, Lynn, how could I do that to you? I am so sorry. And Diane, thank you for the assist. All right, Lynn, good morning. How are you?
Morning. Sorry, I had a little problem right when you called on me. I'm doing well, thanks. I'm looking forward to today, and I wanted to tell Anne Marie a raccoon tidbit. We have one that figured out how to drink out of our hummingbird feeder. So I had to bring it in at night so that it's not empty every morning. And I would also like to ask to have the meeting recorded today as well. Thank you.
No, thanks, Lynn. I think we, the team, anticipated that, and so we're already recording. Just to confirm, is that right, Heather?
Correct.
All
Well, I'm not
right.
Heather, but yes.
Or Nikki. Hi, Nikki. All right. Yeah, I guess for me too, checking in. Reflecting on yesterday, it was kind of bittersweet, after I reflected, the bitter part, of course, centered around a teammate of ours that's been a teammate of ours for 2 years, and to say goodbye to somebody like that, that's, that gets you, especially when you're working with them. But the sweet part is also with a couple years of struggling with the right balance and language with range riders and roles. It was sweet, to get to a spot where we could all live with that. So yeah, mixed feelings, but again, grateful for the team here and the struggle. So I'm looking forward to seeing how I can help you out today. So with that, just briefly go over the agenda. Really, most of the day is scheduled for chronic conflict zones. We planned a half a day today, so public comment, we were going to open that up at 11:30. But we had one adjustment from yesterday, if you remember. And that was Donnie had asked for group advice. Now that we've agreed to range rider changes and roles changes, he was looking for group advice. And is it better to take the existing language and replace it with the new language, or keep the existing language in the document and put the new language in the end of the document as kind of an attachment? And he was looking for feedback. And after having some time to think about it, does anybody have a recommendation for Donnie or anything they'd like to offer? All right, I don't see any. So Donnie, I have a recommendation. Oh, Paula, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I was just waiting. I think that some of the discussion yesterday, I think both Sammy and Dave pointed out that if you just attach it to the end, then it's going to be confusing and potentially contradictory. So I do think that it's better to kind of do a search and replace and insert the new language within the body of the existing protocol, for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paula. Tom?
Morning is starting off well. I completely agree with my friend Paula.
Thank you, Tom. Diane?
As do I. I actually changed my mind after listening to Sammy talk about it yesterday. So Sammy and Dave, I think, both spoke to it. So I agree with all four of them.
All right, thank you, Diane. Donnie, I don't see any more hands, and that was consistent advice for you. Is that what you needed?
Yes, that's what we will do. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, everybody. All right, chronic conflict zones. So if you remember, let's see. So my plan is I'm going to bring up the language that Julia had sent all of us on May 27th, and I think she again shared it with us yesterday. Tom had also shared with Julia and I language him and Dave had crafted back in May as suggested edits. And Tom, just so you know, I shared that with the group early this morning. So I don't think they had a chance to really go through it and understand it. But I wanted to let you know I have that document and the other members have it now as a reference. So I guess my proposal is I'm going to pull up the initial document that Julia sent us. And I'm pausing because, Tom, I read through yours and Dave's this morning, and you've got a lot of additional language in there. You've included what was there originally and additional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up both documents next to each other. And I guess what I'd like to, if you're able to, Tom, if you could maybe summarize the big changes from your document to the original document, just as a start point to have the conversation. Would that be okay?
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to have Dave make a few comments as well, if that would be acceptable, since we worked on this together.
Absolutely.
So what we did in section 9 was consistent with what we had proposed in sections 3 and 4, and that was pulling in statements from other key documents that guide how the department manages wolves. And so that's what you see at the beginning there in section 9. And I guess you also see.
Sorry, Tom. Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to share these documents now, share the screen so people can see it. All right. So just to see what people see. So Tom, can I ask, do you see the text or Word document on your screen?
Yes.
So this is the document Julia sent us. And now I want to show the document that you shared with us. So this is the one that Tom and Dave had worked on. And so Tom, how about I keep this up, let you talk through highlights, and then we can compare and contrast the documents afterwards if that's helpful to the group.
Okay. Yes, maybe the additional thing I would say is the comments that you'll see that we had in there. We have some concerns with defining an area as a chronic conflict zone based on what we've seen happening up in the Northeast, that just having wolves and livestock present together, as that spreads across the state, the whole state can become a chronic conflict zone. And I know that's an overstatement, but that is part of the concern that the producers have, some of them that we have talked with. And so trying to address, instead of a blanket chronic zone, I'm not sure I'm explaining this well enough, but just the concern that we're not all that happy with that term or that phrase. Maybe I'll let Dave step in at this point.
All right, Dave, would you like to add anything?
I guess my problem with the chronic zone is, we're still single species managing wolves in a federally delisted and fully recovered area. And, we also suggested that we change the name. I'm getting off left field a little bit to the wolf wildlife livestock interaction protocol. And I think the department needs to perform its duties, kind of as defined in their mandates, which we put some mandates in there in the wolf plan. We probably wouldn't have these chronic zones because they're just areas where wolves have become hardwired into killing livestock I think we would, if we had an adequate supply of ungulates in these areas, we wouldn't have these chronic zones. I mean, I probably live in a chronic zone with few wolves. Because of other predators, our elk populations, retention and recruitment are down 14%. Our deer herds are practically gone except for a few in the valley floor. And it's other predators are one of the large causes in this. And we don't have a lot of wolves yet, but when we do, the wolves are going to take the heat. So this whole concept of continuing on with single species management and trying to resolve the symptom rather than the cause doesn't fly too good with me. Go on, Tom.
Thank you, Dave. Tom, anything else to add with your two's offering?
I would go back to the opening quotes in the sense that we pulled in there. I think it's helpful to, at least it was helpful for me to be reminded that department, both the commission and the department, but mainly it's the commission and the plan, have already spoken on this issue, that this is not a new issue that we're now grappling with. And so as we chart a path forward, I think it's helpful to know what the map has already been laid out for us by those that have authority over how the department manages wolves. So maybe just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Tom. We got a couple of hands up. Donnie?
So 2 items. I just want to make sure that we're all, that we understand the quotes that we have on the screen. So I think the plan one is clear. The wolves in Washington, is that the document, Dave, that you wrote?
No, that's a document that the commission wrote.
Okay, that's the commission's.
In June of 2011.
Okay.
Trying to give more guidance to the department as to how we manage wolves into the future.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. And then the future of wolves in Washington, is that embedded in that? Or so when you say wolves in Washington, that's their policy statement that's
Right.
online? Right, okay. And then the future of wolves in Washington? Is that a section of that?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you for that for Dave. I just want to make sure that everybody watching knows kind of where these references are coming from. And then knowing that we've had this, we've kind of talked about a little bit of this before, about this intersection of chronic conflict zones and ungulate abundance or other carnivore abundance or other carnivore impact. We've done a little talking internally. And so one of the things that might be useful is, you know, if we unpack this one more, whether that's now or later, but kind of hear from some of our staff in terms of, like Anne-Marie, in terms of how things are looking in some of our chronic conflict zones from an ungulate perspective. And of course, there's no crystal ball there, but to kind of hear her perspectives on it. And then also, you know, there is some decisions being made by the commission in terms of, you know, other carnivore kinds of management. So cougar seasons and bear seasons, and how do we take those other elements and wrap them together? And if we want to, because in some cases there are things that are happening out there, but we're not tying these together at all on a common thread. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Paula?
Let me start my video as well. So, you know, as usual, I appreciate hearing other perspectives on this and Tom and Dave's perspective. And you know, that's what we're here for, is to hear everybody's perspectives. am frankly really not comfortable with these language changes, and it it comes down to a couple reasons. One is, you know, I hear loud and clear that producers, or at least as articulated by what Tom and Dave wrote here, feel like the reason that there are lots of livestock depredations, or can be in certain areas, are because there aren't enough ungulates. And I just don't think that that's established as known. And so I think we need to be more open about what the potential causes are. And I remember a comment by Zoe Hanley from Defenders, who, you know, kind of studied for her PhD some of the interactions, and she, or, you know, some of the drivers of livestock depredations. And she made some really good points about the fact that when you have consistently high overlap of wolves and livestock, that you just increase the chances that there's going to be depredations, and the drivers of that may or may not have anything to do with ungulates. And so I think that we run into problems if we state for sure that we know what the issue is, and we solve it only from that lens. So I would have a hard time. I'd have a hard time including language that just makes those assertions. And then, you know, my other point is that, you know, so that first line, the quote from the Commission's policy, established protocols for addressing chronic problem wolves, we've got that for, you know, each individual case, right? I mean, that's the 3 and 30 days and the 4 and 10. And so when any particular pack starts chronic depredation in a particular instance, we already have a protocol that that allows the department to go to lethal, and that happens very often. I mean, that, you know, so to me, the chronic conflict zone, and if we need different language to describe it, you know, that's fine, but it's when that happens like year after year, right? And, you know, there are ways to, you know, look at trying different deterrents. And but I would also say that the language down, can you go down to sort of the body of the so, you know, there's already language that says that that sort of directs the department and everybody else involved to try to assess what the cause is. And so if there's, you know, if there is an ungulate shortage in a particular area, the language should already allow for everyone who's trying to assess the situation to see if they have enough evidence to say, yeah, that's what we think it is. But even, and I know I've said this before, but even if it is an ungulate issue, for any particular season, you're not going to change the ungulate population. There's nothing you can do in the system that's going to solve that issue like that particular season. And so, like, really the point of this language is to say, given that wolves and livestock are still going to be in the same place, you know, what is it that we can try to do differently to prevent additional depredations, you know, in the upcoming season, you know, given all the variables that are out there. So I just think I hear loud and clear that folks think there's an ungulate issue, but I think there's research and there's processes in place to try to figure that out. And so I'm not sure it fits here. And just the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is that, you know, the conservation folks asked for this language because of social tolerance issues kind of on the other end of the spectrum, that it's just too hard on the system to have wolves shot every year kind of in the same place. And so what can we do to stop that? So that piece really needs to come loud and clear. And that part of the public input, I think, is really important, you know, in addition to a policy statement that the commission made nine years ago. I mean, I think present day social realities on both sides are really important to take into account.
Thank you, Paula. Dan, Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Paula, for bringing up that last point. Yeah, Tom and Dave, I appreciate your work. And but reading it this morning, it really felt like sort of a splash of cold water on the collaborative process. Essentially rehashing and just retyping quotes from past documents kind of limits and neuters what we do on the WAG. We're here to provide guidance to the director. Those documents exist. Those statements exist. They're already in the universe. We don't need to. We're trying to build a protocol of suggestion based on multiple stakeholders from different walks of life from our state coming together and forging agreements. So yeah, reading this, I can't tell if you're just sort of stonewalling or you're willing to proceed and try to find a way to address the killing of wolves in the same place year after year.
All right, Dan. Thank you. Donnie?
So one thing that would be helpful for me, Rob, is if we kind of look at the document that Julia sent out, and then when Dave or Tom are kind of talking about what their needs are, if you could maybe flash back over. But if we, because right, yeah. So
gotcha.
Yep. I mean, so mine was there is a huge element of unknown here, and I'm not speaking against you, Dave or Tom. I'm just saying that there's some items that we have here, and the question of whether you can draw a line between those or not. And so there's an unknown there. But if we phrase it, I'm kind of going back to a conversation I had with Anne Marie earlier about kind of how ungulates are, harvest data are looking and that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering if it's thinking about it more in terms of, okay, for chronic conflict zones, we are really exploring a lot of things to try to address this chronic issue. And many of those are going to be in the range of the tools that we already have in the toolbox, non-lethal and lethal. But is there ways to kind of say that if we reverse this one about ungulates and say it more in the sense of the department manages for ungulate abundance? Because we do. Right, we do that. We already manage for ungulate abundance, and to just acknowledge that certainly natural prey are a relative element in this. Now, drawing that line between conflict and natural prey, again, some of us would draw a line, and some of us wouldn't draw a line, and maybe be a big question mark in the line or whatever. But it is an element out there that we talk about a lot. And so how can we acknowledge the importance of prey, but not at the same time, go too far in the space where we really don't have the answers, right? And I'm just wondering if just acknowledging the department manages for a prey abundance, and that's important, helps us get there. Long-winded, sorry.
That's okay, Donnie. All right, so for the group, the top document is the one that Julia sent us, and the bottom document is the one that Tom and Dave shared with us. So I guess I'll go through highlighting what I see as differences. I'll keep an eye on the participant list as, for people to raise hands. The first difference is the quotes on the bottom section from Tom and Dave. They added those quotes that they just showed us. So that's a significant difference from what Julia sent us. And then this is the part that starts, that that's a comparison with what Julia sent us. So I don't see any changes. Now, Tom and Dave, does the yellow highlight have any significance for you? Because, for example, the chronic conflict zones paragraph, there's really no difference between what Julia sent you and what you have, but I didn't know if your highlight had any significance.
That actually came from us, Rob, from Julie and I. And
Oh. I withdraw the question.
It was to highlight new language, Rob.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. So let's scroll these up. I'm kind of thinking through this as we go through. Is it more helpful walking through what Julia sent us just to familiarize everybody with it? Or is it helpful trying to make this comparison like we're doing now? Diane.
It helps me to be able to compare the two.
Okay.
If other people can see it. I know it has to be hard for folks that don't have a screen in front of them, but, and is now time to talk about this section?
Sure.
I was interested in hearing your thoughts, Tom and Dave, related to removing the statement about land management agencies. There's several quotes in the plan that talks about WDFW staff working with land management agencies. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts related to that.
Thank you, Diane.
So you want me to talk, Rob?
Yes, Tom or Dave, please.
So I think, Diane, the thought there is, and what we've heard loud and clear from the Forest Service, is that they don't manage wildlife. And I think DNR would say the same thing. And so that was our thinking there, just for clarity, that it's the roles and responsibilities issue. It's Fish and Wildlife that manages wildlife. So for clarity in the protocol, so it is what we were thinking of striking that language.
Can I respond to that?
Please, go ahead, Diane.
So I appreciate that, Tom. But I think in the plan, it specifically talks about the importance of the conversations between the department and those land management agencies, those agencies who do oversee grazing permits and that sort of thing related to den sites and anything related to those things. And I think it's really clear in the plan. So I would be against removing that language.
All right. Thank you, Diane. Any other comments in this section? So I guess what I propose we'll do is we'll go through this document in this way. I'll scroll through to try and identify the differences. And I'll keep alert for hands raised to tell me that someone wants to make a comment. So we'll get through the comparison and then we'll go back and revisit, areas of discussion, such as the quotes up top or this particular phrase that Diane pointed out. So I'm going to scroll up a little more to see what else is, so there's a phrase here in the center of Tom and Dave's that they've also crossed out. And Tom and Dave, did you want to share your thinking for recommending that cross out, please? Tom or Dave, I don't hear you.
Well, I don't have that cross out on my screen.
Oh, so Dave, what do you see on your screen?
What I have on I'm not on the screen.
Oh.
I have the section 9 as the very last one that was done.
So do you
on the screen, and I have our section 9 on paper, So
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about, so let Tom answer it.
Well, let me take an attempt here, Dave. If you have the document in front of you, do you have the line numbers down the left-hand side of the page?
Yes, sir.
So we're talking about line numbers 26, 27, and 28.
That
There's,
does not correspond with what I have.
okay, all right. Sorry about that, Dave. Tom, do you have any insight on that cross out?
Dave, on yours, it might show up as starting on line 25 after the phrase "for example." And then we struck, these discussions might be associated with innovations in non-lethal tools or changes. Do you see that?
No, mine is the last one that was put out, which section 9 starts at 570 and goes to 601.
All right, Dave. Got a
Which I
couple
think
people.
is the very last version that came from the department.
So I'm sorry to break in, but my suggestion just for efficiency is just read the line. You know, maybe the sentence before and the sentence after, but read the line that's being crossed out. And that way we're not having to mess with going back and forth between versions.
All right, thank you, Paula. I can do that. I've got a couple people with their hands up, so let me go to those, and then perhaps I can read them for everybody. Donnie?
Come back to me. I'd like you to read them so people are on the right page.
All right. Dan?
I mean, you can read it so that people understand what I'm going to say, or I can just say.
Okay.
Say.
All right. And I'll read it and then go back to you, Dan.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to read the sentence before the cross out and then the cross out language. So the plan will be for the annual grazing season and will seek creative alternatives to reduce or eliminate additional loss of livestock and attempt to break the cycle of lethal removal of wolves in these areas. For example, these discussions might be associated with innovations in non-lethal tools or changes in how they are deployed. And that last sentence was struck. And that's what we're asking about the reasoning. So Dan, let me go back to you. And do you have any comment?
Yes. My first comment actually is for the line above, and it's a question to the group because I don't recall, but I seem to remember us last year sort of determining that changing wolf behavior is an unrealistic expectation for us to do, and that really our goal was to look at implementing deterrence, and so sort of controlling what humans can control and not putting the success of the wolf plan on changing a wolf's behavior. So having changes to their behavior as a result of what we do is desirable, but I think striking out that and replacing with the old language that's proposed here is kind of going counter to the recent thrust of the group. And then, going back to the section you just read, I just want to know from Tom and Dave their rationale on removing anything about innovations, discussions around innovations, and just only focusing on ungulates. It just seems interesting. So I just want to hear from them why.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So Tom or Dave, any feedback for Dan and the others?
Well, I'm not 100%. I don't know if I can answer the question 100%, but our feelings. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dave. You're a little faint.
Yeah. Really, our feelings are, I don't know what the tools, the additional tools are that work for these hardwired wolves that are killing livestock. It's, you know, cowbells aren't going to help. I wish they would. I think we're just kind of kidding ourselves with innovations in non-lethal tools or changes in how they're deployed.
All right. I
just
paused.
don't know what I just don't know what the tools are. I think we're just kind of kidding ourselves by saying that we're just going to change what we're really doing in some way once these wolves become hardwired. And that's what I think we're talking about in these chronic zones.
All right. Thank you, Dave. I got a couple hands up. Donnie?
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. One is I just wanted to share in, relative to this consideration in this sentence and the one above, the one, and I know we moved past it, but I wanted to just share with the group the one above. We do engage with the Forest Service on even ungulate issues. So we, several months ago, sat down with the Forest Service and some stakeholders, and I think some of those are on our attendees list right now, and talked about, managing for openings. It was kind of in this idea of managing for ungulate abundance and to be able to see cows better and that kind of stuff. So there is a dialogue that goes on with the Forest Service, that I think you all correctly pointed out that they're not the management lead on that stuff. The department is for wildlife, but there is conversations that I think are relative to, moving forward in this this situation. And the other one related to this example, or for this edit we're talking about, the for example, and the part that's crossed off there. I think the best example of that is what we have right now, those that Candace and others kind of put together, of those kind of creative ideas that are, some are new, some are different twist on old ones, and using those under kind of a pilot project. And, and we do want to have, we don't want to just do that blindly. We do want to have conversations with producers, with landowners, and et cetera, when you're thinking about trying those approaches and stuff. I do think it's important not to convey in this that is a solution. It may help or it may not. And so I want to make sure we acknowledge that, it's that we're trying to go a little above and beyond in as many places as we can to try to resolve the issue. But it doesn't convey that, oh, this will solve it.
Thank you, Donnie. Anne Marie?
Yeah, so I guess I have a couple things. So to follow up a little bit on what Donnie said about the Forest Service. So the Forest Service manages wildlife habitat. And in doing so, I mean, they just funded a project in the Kettle Range that was, a multi-year project looking at the ways that they harvest timber and what that does to the nutritional quality and availability of forage for mule deer and white-tailed deer. And so, they're funding things that look specifically at wildlife and ungulates in order to tailor their timber management practices to benefit those species. And so there is a direct link there, as well as we address those things in our elk and deer plans about working with partners to manage habitat. So that's that portion. And then the other thing I guess I want to just in response to Dave a little bit is we're not talking about chronic conflict wolves. We're talking about chronic conflict zones. And so in a lot of these, well, you know, in the one case that we're basically talking about, we have removed an entire pack. And so the new wolves in there are not hardwired for anything. And so I guess I just want folks to remember that distinction, and then also to not stifle ourselves with creative solutions that we might not know about now, but might be something in the future. You know, we see this with wildlife management, technology, modeling processes. They're rapidly evolving, and there's some that when I was in college, I never would have thought of. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep striving for that.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Lynn?
With all due respect to the work that Dave and Tom have done, I really don't understand how the day before this was not discussed, that we were supposed to be comparing their version to the version that the entire group came up with. I feel like they're driving this conversation, and I don't feel like that's equitable. I may be alone in that feeling, but I just don't understand how this occurred.
Yeah, I could share with you my thinking, Lynn, because I'm the one that started with this comparison. Think from my thinking is all of us have some thoughts on what this should say. Dave and Tom had taken the time to put some words down, and so we know from their perspective, these are changes that are important to them. So I just offered it as a start point. Okay, we know some of our members have this point of view. Let's use that as a start point. I'm sorry if I gave the impression that this somehow supersedes other people's thinking. That was not my intent. And, you know, as anything with this group, Linda, you know, we can change the way we're doing this if we think there's a better way. I see Tom has his hand up, and so I'll let Tom say his piece, and then Donnie. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So this was, to Lynn's point, Dave and I developed this back, oh my gosh, April, May, and then we shared it with WAG. So this isn't something that's new. This has been around for, what has it been now, 3-4 months. So I apologize that it appears otherwise to you, Lynn. That was not our intention. It was the same time that we provided our thoughts on sections 3 and 4. This language was also put forward. I guess to kind of cut to the chase, because we worked on this 3-4 months ago, I'm having to play a little bit catch up as well, so I apologize for that. But for many of the producers, the concept of a chronic conflict zone is not real popular, because if for the producer, that means, especially if they live in one, that they're having a lot of problems like we're seeing with the wedge right now. They want the problem resolved, not to be treated differently and maybe to languish on longer than it needs to from their perspective. So I think that's an important thought as we have this conversation as a group, that this truly is one of the harder issues, I think, and a difference of opinion, and maybe a strong difference of opinion between the conservation community and the producers.
Rob, are you still there? Can folks hear me? This is Donnie.
Yeah, we can hear you, Donnie.
I think we may have lost Rob for a minute. Let's give him a moment here. So I had my hand in the queue, so I'm gonna share a comment, and then I'm gonna switch my hat until Rob gets back.
I
People
think
okay?
Rob's back.
Okay, Rob's back. Awesome.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Donnie. Yes, you were next in the queue.
So I wanted to kind of reflect on what Lynn said and Tom said. Thank you for sharing that Lynn. I know that I think that, like Rob said, there has been I think Tom and Dave took a really deep dive on this, and so we've had a lot of focus on that, and so we've not by purpose or anything like that, but so it seems it's been a conversation around what Tom and Dave brought to us. So let's make sure that as we go through this, that others are sharing also where they have issues or struggles or comments or additions or changes or whatever. We're working from the language that Julia put out, and it's open for anybody to comment on. The other one was that now saying that, thank you for saying, Tom, that producers are struggling with a chronic conflict zone. That's probably why you're feeling what some of the angst around some of the language is, because folks are grappling with why is that not acceptable language. I'm wondering if we need to, are we really at the edit stage here? Do we really need to have a conversation where that's fairly new to me, that producers are struggling with a chronic conflict zone concept. I'd like to understand that more. The couple producers that I visit with in the chronic conflict areas, I guess that message hasn't really come across that way to me. So anyways, just a couple comments.
Thank you, Donnie. Paula?
Yeah, thank you. So I am struck by, Tom, by your description of how producers are feeling. I have heard it expressed before. I mean, I remember comments that Don has made in past meetings about not liking this section. But I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding of the intent, because it kind of feels like it's an us versus them thing. Like it's the conservationists versus the livestock producers, and this is about delaying or making things worse. And I want to harken back to the genesis for trying to have this section in here. And I'll just speak for myself. I mean, my intent with wanting to see a section in here about chronic conflict zones is very much both to prevent situations where producers are losing livestock on a regular basis, and prevent situations where the state is having to kill wolves year after year. And when we first started talking about this, there was a recognition that that situation is stressful for everybody. And I guess what I'm gleaning or what I'm hearing is that maybe from the producer's perspective, it's no, just get on with killing the wolves. Just, if there's a problem, stop screwing around with trying to find better non-lethals, and just take care of the problem, which i.e. means killing the wolves. And if that's the case, we are at a fundamental difference, because I think that the idea that wolves have to be killed in the same spot year after year, which is the genesis of this, is indicative that we haven't figured out the problem. And I can't imagine that from a rancher's perspective, having there be depredations that take a while to find, and going through this process of coming up to lethal, and then going through all the stress of lethal control either being successful or not successful, and then all of the rest of the world getting upset about it, like that doesn't seem like a good state of affairs. So having language in the protocol whose intent is to say, hey, can we step back and try to direct resources to really understanding what's driving this? And as Anne Marie said, it may not be the particular wolves, it might be an area. And it might be something about the landscape or whatever it is, but that we garner resources and we try to solve the problem to everybody's benefit. This isn't about solving the problem just for wolf advocates so they don't see wolves killed and cattle keep getting killed. It's to solve the problem so you have fewer depredations in the first place, so you don't have to go through the stress of going to lethal. So I just wanted to make sure that intent was clear. This is not an us versus them. It's a let's solve this problem for everybody. So producers are losing fewer animals, and the rest of the public that doesn't want to see annual wolf removal, also has a sense of relief. So that I just wanted to clarify that. I don't want producers to feel like this is imposing something that's just going to make their lives harder. That's not what this is about.
Thank you, Paula. Dave?
Yeah, I've kind of had my hand up for quite a while. Back to what Lynn said, this Section 9 that we're seeing has never been reviewed very intensely. It's been written by the department. It wasn't written by WAG. Back to what Paula says, I think the livestock community has a lot of concerns about the chronic conflict zones as written, as just more burdensome to them, and by treating the symptoms. And I think Paula kind of touched on that. They're more interested in just what Paula is. They don't want to kill more wolves. They just would like to figure out what is causing these chronic zones. And I don't think this is written very much toward causation. It's more toward just trying to resolve the issue. And I think we should be thinking about causation here. That's all I got to say.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Don? Don, if you're talking, we don't hear you.
Good morning to you.
Hey, now we can hear
you. I usually have a lot of noise going on, so I mute myself too. Well, I guess my first statement, as usual, is when I saw the chronic conflict zone concept, I said, I don't think we even need that. There's no reason to apply additional burdens on the victims. Even if somebody says come up with more creative or innovative solutions, which of course I haven't told them to you yet. But I think Lynn asked a question about this being developed by WAG and then, changed by Dave and Tom, but I don't think it was developed by WAG. I think it was a small committee that I certainly wasn't on, which is okay. They can develop that and then we'll run it by. But the reason the producers are not too happy with it is it isn't because necessarily that wolves won't get killed fast enough, because that's never happened before anyway, and it happens rarely and it takes forever. Having the chronic conflict zone designation probably won't slow that down much. But what it does is it asks the producers to, deploy more effective things earlier, or we're gonna not consider you important if something dies, at your place. Well, nobody's developed a effective deterrent. And talk about it. And since we're talking about it a bit, ear tags, RFID tags, and cows and cowbells, and reflective collars, and blah, blah, blah. Has nothing to do with whether a wolf will kill things. I did like a bit of the discussion about the ungulate thing. Dave says, well, we don't have enough ungulates, so therefore we're going to get, they're going to kill whatever's there. The department says, well, we don't have enough ungulates, but there ain't a thing we can do about it. I think there is, but I don't know if you want me to write a report, but I can tell you can get rid of the chronic conflict zone. I've heard this stuff about prey switching and everything else. It'd be a 1/10 or 1/20th the cost if you would provide some ungulates for the wolves to eat and see if they would switch to those ungulates. And if they ate them and not the cattle, everybody'd be happy. So if anybody wants to know any more about my concept, they can ask me now or ask me later. So good luck again. My deal on the chronic conflict zone is it doesn't need to be there. It just puts another block in or a reason to not do something. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Donnie?
Yeah, thanks, Don. I'm gonna speak a little different than that. It's a bigger circle than just us kind of weighing in on this, right? We have stakeholders and the governor's office, et cetera. I think the chronic conflict zone concept, you hear it loud and clear in the first letter from Governor Inslee. And I think that's reasonable to ask the question in these areas where you have repeated conflict, whether it's every year or seems like it's every year. And even when you remove the wolves and it resurfaces a year later or 2 years later, do we just treat that the same or do we treat it different? And I think that, we have to acknowledge that the governor's office is in the system here and has put that forward to us to try to, not to resolve and make go away, but to, because that may be impossible, but to try to say, okay, recognizing that, are there some things we can do? And that's a tough one for sure, but that's what we have in front of us. And so I think it is real. And I think that we should address it. And it may be that there isn't any great ideas right now. And it may be that we continue to explore, we say, you've already seen the department step out and kind of move on this a little bit with the attachments that we had in the response to the governor's letter, the range riding, and then the pilot projects that we have. But to us, those are steps forward in thinking about these chronic areas. But it may be also that, hey, those may not get to grabbing things other folks have said, David said, those may really not get to the causes, but we're not just turning a blind eye. And then just to acknowledge the comment that Paula put in the chat that, this wasn't something we drafted, the department drafted. This was us taking your previous conversations and flip chart notes and putting together, and we've done that on 2 iterations now, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Donnie. Lynn?
I'd like to address the question about an ungulate shortage. According to the predator prey project that's ongoing right now between UW and the department, they have 2 study areas, 1,700 square miles in Northeast Washington as well as in Okanagan. And with all the collared ungulates they have yet to identify a wolf depredation, and they've had no DNA of scavenging wolves at kill sites of collared animals. So, according to that, and I know the study's not finished, wolves are not killing ungulates to access in those areas.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So I guess, you know, our producers, I'd like to hear from, or I'm asking the producer side, you know, because I've heard that this section is, you know, some of you at least think this section shouldn't be here. Donnie's, you know, shared that, you know, for example, the governor's letter indicates we need to do something different. The language that exists now is an attempt to reflect past WAG discussions. Am I hearing now that at least some of the producers, it's going to be hard for you to help get this language right? Am I hearing that right? In other words, you know, we're trying to find the right balance of language to meet everybody's needs, but I'm worried I heard you don't want to play right now, and because it's a section you don't believe in or support. So I just wanted to check in on that. Tom?
So I'm trying to think how to say this. So this one is, well, like I said, this one is interesting for us working together and coming to an agreement, I think, and maybe apparently is more challenging than some of us thought. I'll be real honest with you, my friends. Having the governor send his letter out a year ago, from our perspective, did not help, because for us, it politicized an already difficult wildlife management issue. So, you know, we all have buttons, right, that sometimes people push. So it's helpful, I think, for you to know, for some of us, when we talk about a reference to the governor's letter and the governor's asking for this and that, that is not something that encourages us to want to move in that direction. So just being honest with you all, because the last thing we want to do is what we have, a politicization of wildlife management. So just to, you know, being honest, brutally honest maybe with you, but that's important to this conversation as well. And I guess from the producer's perspective, from what the folks that I hear from, is when they have a problem in their with what's happening to their livestock, they want it dealt with, and they want it dealt with now. And so I think as we approach this is a good discussion. I don't think that we're going to reach agreement on language by noon today, but we should keep working on this and having more of a conversation like WAG does in getting a better, going deeper and getting a better understanding of where everyone is coming from, so we can forge forward and reach agreement on something. But this is going to take a little time, I think.
Thank you, Tom. Don?
Hello again. So the governor's request for more creative and innovative solutions to end conflict, I think, is where you need to go. I don't think you need a chronic conflict zone designation to get more creative. I think whenever the problem pops up, you apply the creative solution and fix the conflict, and you have less dead cattle and less dead wolves. And so the stuff that's in the wording now, just ask the producers to come up with that or apply them when somebody says, here's a creative and innovative solution that'll help you. I think maybe the department needs to apply creative and innovative solutions to the wildlife that they're trying to manage, and let the producers, you know, manage their livestock. And so whenever anybody wants my creative and innovative solution, I'd be happy to share.
All right. Thank you, Don. Sammy?
So I typed it in the, I agree with Don's statements that coming up with creative ideas need to be on both sides. It can't be completely laid on the producer to apply all of the creative ideas. We need creative ideas to how to keep wolves at bay too. We've got lots of them trying to work with cows, but let's try some of them more creative with hazing wolves or keeping wolves from depredating in those areas. It can't just be keep the livestock out of the areas. And I typed it in the chat deal, but everybody obviously can't see it. People on the phone can't, but I understand the concept of this section and the concept of preventing or trying to not have chronic conflict zones. I think that concept of not having them is equal on all sides of this playing field. Nobody wants those, right? Like that's very clear that that's where we need to be. But I struggle with the idea that we're going to write a chronic conflict zone and this is going to be our tool once we've met that. I struggle with why do we hold on to a tool until that's met, right? Like we should be using these tools as the situation is progressing. You know, you're not going to start out in an area where there's no conflict at all with every tool in the toolbox, but as the situation progresses, you move forward with it. So I'm not real clear as to why we would write up a chronic conflict section that has tools kind of withheld, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with that. So, like I said, I understand the concept, and I think we all agree that nobody wants to get to a chronic zone. So these tools and creative innovation parts, you know, maybe there's another place in the protocol that we need to write up some of this other stuff, but I'm not sure that this section needs to exist.
Okay. Thank you, Sammy. Dan?
Yeah, this is a response to Tom being brutally honest with the group about his view of the governor's request. So we are an advisory group to the Director of Fish and Wildlife. The director has worked for the governor. The governor made a request to the director. It's not politicizing, but this is our role, is to recognize that this is managed by a state agency who is overseen by the governor, ultimately.
Thank you, Dan. Paula?
So a couple thoughts. I'm remembering back to the genesis of this discussion, and maybe after this meeting, I'll go back and read the notes to make sure I'm right. But for me, this idea didn't come from the governor. It came from knowing how awful and stressful things had become in the summer of 2019, you know, while the OPT pack was sort of in the midst of being eliminated, on top of the reactions from 2018 and 2016. I mean, there were removals in 2017, but it wasn't quite as socially tense. But you know, the idea of this, at least from my perspective as a conservation WAG member, in reading Washington State's reaction writ large, sort of both on the producer side and on the part of the public that pays attention to this and, you know, has a more than passing interest in wildlife management and the kind of folks that we hear from. I mean, you heard some of them yesterday in public comment. So, you know, this came from my perspective, it came before the governor's letter, or I mean, I don't even remember when he sent it, but it had nothing, like my wanting language in here had nothing to do with the governor. It had everything to do with worry that that all of the parts of the social system that interact when these things happen was going to become, there's going to be too much conflict and it was going to be unmanageable. And it was going to result in less goodwill, less flexibility, and less of everything that everybody wants out of this. So I wonder, and I'm struck by the perceptions that I hear from the producers about what this language says and does, and it doesn't reflect at least what I thought was the intent. So I wonder if with our remaining time, we could see if we can come to agreement on the intent of something like this, including, I mean, I agree with Sammy's point. I mean, if there are innovative tools, we should use them to prevent chronic conflict zones from happening in the first place and not wait until we have one. I mean, I think that's a really good point. But, you know, we already have some of these zones and we want to break the cycle. So is there, you know, can we go through an exercise for, I don't know, an hour or something before public comment to see if we can come to agreement on the elements of something that meets the original goals of this section? And if we can come to agreement on intent and objective, then maybe we start over in terms of rewriting a section. Maybe it has a different title, or maybe pieces are integrated into different parts of the protocol. But rather than just kind of, I appreciated Tom's commitment to trying to work things through instead of just throwing our hands up. But maybe instead of clashing over the existing words on the page, we step back and see if we can come to agreement on what we're all trying to accomplish here, and then we start over with new language. That's just a possible proposal.
Thank you, Paula. Lisa?
I agree that with Paula that it would be nice if we could come up with something that would work for both of us. I'm not sure if that's possible or not, and I'm actually looking at it from the other perspective, of course, which is the hunting perspective, and where that comes into play is where are my hunting dollars and the constituents that I represent, where are hunting dollars going, and they are going towards this conflict. So I just kind of want to put my 2 cents in that way, that we do have we're vested in it as well when it comes to this type of conflict. So it would be nice to know. But that said, and I'm not a livestock producer, it would be nice if, when we're looking at this chronic conflict, to recognize that we do have to come up with some solutions that do take it away from the livestock producers, and it isn't just the ungulate issue either. We just need to come up with something that recognizes that the livestock producers are trying to do as much as they can, and so we can look at some other options on that. That's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, we're at about our planned break time. I think, or I'm recommending, let's try Paula's idea when we come back. Let's spend some time thinking about, okay, you know, we did some work on this chronic conflict zone section, but why are we working on it? What objectives are we trying to achieve? What is the intent of this section? So let's spend some time talking about that when we come back. All right, it's just about 10:30, so how about we see you again at 10:45?
Hey, Heather, I don't see anything.
I'm working on it. It went black for some reason. I'm having
Okay.
issues with my screen. Just a second. What I try to do is switch my screen view, but it's not wanting to come up. Shoot. Just a second. You're seeing something now. It's just not the right thing.
You have such a nice clean desktop.
Yeah. There we go. I just need to swap the screens really quick. There we go.
Perfect.
Thanks.
We're just giving the full effect of what everyone would expect if we were in person.
Yes, exactly.
All right, I have us recording again.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's 10:45. Let's just check out a couple people to see if they're back. How about, oh, hey, Greg, are you with us now?
Yes, I am. I had a staff meeting that I had to facilitate this morning, so I apologize for being late.
Oh, that's okay. Just good to see you. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's see. How about Donnie? Are you with us? All right. Diane, are you here with us?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Okay, and then let's just check. Jess, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Good. Yeah, I wrestle with, it's hard when you're not in person. Do you know people are here or not? And you can't ask everybody to put their camera on because sometimes connectivity is affected by the camera. So it's kind of new adjustments to the Zoom world. And I hope we don't have to do that much longer. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. We left for the meeting with a proposal of asking members feedback on, hey, what's the goal or intent of a chronic conflict zone section, and offered as a start point there. And then maybe from that, we can figure out whether it's a separate section or is it different locations in the document. But before we go, Bill, I see you have your hands up. What would you like to say?
Well, let me get started off with a couple of ideas here.
Okay.
Listening to everybody this morning, Paula is a very good speaker, and she wins me over with a lot of her thinking and thoughts. Very good job in there. I also understand where Dave and Don are coming from, that there's a lot of stuff in here. And I think one of the problems we're having is when you look at the original wolf plan, I wasn't around at the start, but the dispersion of the wolf population is much slower than what people planned for. And, Northeast Washington is sort of the leader of having our problems. And we're ignoring a couple of tools. And this has been mentioned before, but we bring this up again. Somewhere we need to take a look at these with the slower dispersion. Translocation was in the original wolf plan to help spread the wolves around so we can start considering controlling where we need to. Why? And I mean, I've heard some feedback, but why don't we look at translocation again and see if maybe not necessarily the problem wolves, but some of the problem areas like the wedge pack, if we removed them all and some new wolves would moved in, those would be ideal ones to translocate, to do something with. The other area that Lisa just brought up before our break is hunting. And right now we can't do that, but it's an area that we need to maybe take a look at and change, because Idaho has, anytime you have a chronic conflict zone, Idaho has a year-round season with unlimited wolf kill. Wolf hunting is very difficult, as told by our wolf specialists and the people that I've talked to in Idaho, but if we had a chronic conflict zone where all the other tools there, maybe we need to get that tool. If the game department, they make a lot of money on the special drawings for the moose and the other special, a lot of special drawings and stuff, they're going to have some money, but they're very difficult to hunt. But an increased human presence in that one area, maybe that's going to help disperse the wolves. And there's an area that we haven't really talked about. Maybe we need to revisit these two areas and take a look at them again and see if they might be helpful to prevent us from having more problems in the future. And I give that thought to everybody to think about, and that's it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Bill. Dan?
Thanks, Bill. Just to quickly respond to you, wolves are state endangered species, and so they're not eligible to be hunted by the public. So that's not really an option at this point. But this is obviously really, this is a hard discussion to have over Zoom. This is one of the big flashpoints we've had in recent years. So just recognizing the difficulty of that, but I think Paula made some really brought us back to sort of the genesis of this issue. This came after just a great deal of social unrest and pain from the OPT situation, and had been boiling over for a while. And so I just want to reach out to the producers and just really understand your perspective on why this is viewed as sort of a one-way burden on your community, and see if we can find ways to sort of either reframe it to sort of rework it and find a way to break through this. This is the key here is to find new ways to help everybody, to not put extra burdens, and then to really heal or make robust this social dynamics that's so important for what we're doing from all sides. And so I really want us to not just kind of flush this one or push it aside or stonewall it, but find a way to really engage it, because chronic conflict zones is critical for the confidence in what we're doing here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Bill?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, Dan, because it is a state policy, and it was in the wolf plan that the wolves would be state delisted or listed when there were wolves in all three sections equally scattered around. That policy can be changed. The feds delisted the wolves in eastern Washington, and what I'm saying is we need to go back and take a look at that and maybe change that policy to allow a special case where we can actually use this as a tool in the chronic zones up here. Policy can be changed.
All right, thank you, Bill. So Dan asked a question of producers, and if producers have a response, buy some time here before we go to the goal and intent of the section. And Jess, I see you have your hand up.
Just to talk to Dan a little bit, and we're friends. We're always going to be friends, and no matter what we talk about. But this is I think, at least as far as people are telling me, just naming it a chronic conflict zone. Yeah, we all know that it happens year after year in the same area or things of that nature. It feels like, at least on our side, is that it's just one more stone we have to step over to get some relief. And what our side of the deal is, we don't want any more cows to die, and we don't want any more wolves to die. We just got to figure out a way to, naming it a chronic zone. I get it, but at the same time, giving it a name doesn't help it any. But that's just my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Jess. Anne Marie?
It's actually Trent. Yeah, and I guess I understand that. And I think this goes back to what Paula was saying. There's like a different perception of what naming it a chronic conflict zone does. And at least from my perspective, it seems like that, it acknowledges that these are areas that have had consistent and chronic conflict issues, even after full pack removals in some instances. And it kind of focuses our attention as an agency on trying to resolve those by whatever means that may involve, whether that's wolf management or the livestock thing. Like I don't envision this as falling solely on the shoulders of livestock producers by any means. In my mind, it's kind of taking a focused look at what's going on in these areas and seeing if we can address those issues. So yes, so less cows get killed and so less wolves get killed. And I guess it's frustrating to hear that people think that this is an impediment rather than kind of, an effort to reduce conflict overall.
All right, with that lead in, I'm gonna share my screen and try and replicate flip chart notes again to get to the discussion that Trent, I think you started us off on is, the intent of a section, whether we call it chronic conflict zones or not. Okay, bear with me a second. Okay. Bear with me again. I've got to get the participant list up so I can see that too. All right. So Trent, just to key off words, I might ask you to say it again, but I think, you said something like acknowledges areas with consistent issues. I don't know if that's adequate or if I need to add something there.
Yeah, or consistent conflict even after lethal removal, repeated lethal removal. I think that was the genesis of this whole concept, whenever that was, a year ago or so. But folks can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Thanks, Trent. Diane?
Well, and I think Trent also used this word, and one that I thought was important was I thought that one of the reasons we started this conversation was because we wanted there to be a focus of resources, a focus from department staff in areas where we were continuing to have conflict. So that focus was important, and maybe focus is something that area doesn't want, but it isn't a focus in a negative way, more like a focus on resources and that sort of thing.
All right, thank you, Diane. Anyone else have any thoughts to, on the goal or intent of such a section? And let's see, who's that? Dave.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dave.
If our goal is to truly have acceptance of a sustainable wolf population on the landscape, I think it's very important if we looked at lessons learned and management applied by the service. They've got 30 years of managing wolves, and probably the 3 states game departments or agencies that have a lot of time involved that are within the NRM and trying to manage wolves, and not try to recreate the wheel here. And I think we should take a hard look at how they're doing it. Livestock industry is certainly not opposed to having a sustainable wolf population on the landscape and have acceptance of that. But I think we're continually are trying to recreate the wheel here when we can look at 30 years of wolf management in the NRM. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Diane. Whoop.
Thanks for that, Dave. I guess lessons learned is really important, but I also think innovation is important. And I guess I would like to see a system where if a rancher came up with a great idea for something that he or she would like to try on their plate.
I'm not opposed to that.
Diane, I don't know if I captured that well, but please let me know if I didn't. Anne-Marie?
Yep, this is just so the notes are accurate. I think Dave was talking about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when he said so.
Thank you. Gosh. Forgive my poor typing skills. All right. So right now, any other thoughts on the purpose and intent of the section? Because right now it sounds like, on the one hand, it's acknowledgement of areas with conflict, with repeated lethal removals, and a desire for more resources to then be applied to that area. Anne-Marie.
I mean, just thinking from like how we justify spending money, I think it also gives us sort of, I don't know, things to put in grant applications. It's a way to get money to do the things that are in there.
All right, Paula?
So I think we need to capture in here the objective of reducing livestock loss and killing wolves and wolf loss.
Thank you, Paula.
And just one more just nuance on that, because I think sometimes we might either be talking past each other or just coming from different places. So, and I'm thinking about what I heard Bill say, and Dave mentioned sustainable populations and looking at the Northern Rocky Mountains for lesson learned. But I think at least from the conservation side, a lot of the social upheaval is about having wolves killed repeatedly. So solutions like hunting don't reduce that; they increase it. So it's not as much about a population issue. It's wanting, it's wanting a state of affairs where, at least in the context of wolf livestock issues, that wolves are not killed for livestock conflict, and that wolves in general aren't killed. So in other words, the solution, you don't have to type this down, but just so everybody understands what I'm talking about, a solution that says, let's control the wolf population in general in order to reduce wolf livestock conflict, that's not getting at the objectives, at least from the conservation community, and anybody else from the conservation community can say that. But I think what we're talking about right now is reducing killing wolves overall. So just wanted to be clear on that.
Thank you, Paula. Julia?
I jumped in because I didn't see any other hands raised, so sorry about that. But I think if we're talking intent here and goal, I think it's really important to spell out, at least from my view, I think in a chronic conflict zone, but really anywhere, but in a chronic conflict zone especially, accountability is shared. It's not fair for one side to put it all on livestock producers and say that it's all livestock producers' fault and they just need to be expected to jump through all these hoops to make this stop happening. And conversely, it's not fair to say that livestock producers have no accountability in these areas. Accountability for conflict is shared. And based on my own experience in the field, there's no solution that works where both parties or all parties aren't working toward the shared solution. If one party sits back and says, I'm not going to do anything about this, it's not going to work. So I really think we need to emphasize a statement about shared accountability among everyone.
Thank you, Julia. Dave?
Yes, Paula, in my mind, is changing the goal when she says that she doesn't want to control wolves, period. I thought the goal was to have a sustainable wolf population and have acceptance of those across the spectrum of people who have to deal with wolves. And on the issue of accountability, I think you need to talk about the department also.
Got it.
I'm
Thank
through.
you. Thank you, Dave. And I'm attempting to type. All right. Any other thoughts on intent and goal of whether we use a section for chronic conflict zone or not? So, okay, let me ask this then. So it looks like the intent here is you have an area that's different because of repeated conflict, repeated lethal removal, and a desire to do something different when you have that situation. And that something different is more resources to try and help alleviate that conflict. And that all parties share in that situation. And so I think the chronic conflict zone, it sounds like that's what that section's trying to do. So, some of our producers had mentioned that, we really don't need a separate chronic conflict zone. That one, just by saying that, it gives the impression of an additional burden on producers. So I'd like to offer a question to that part of our team, is based on what you've heard here with goal and intent. I guess, does this make sense to you? Do you understand for the part of our team that's asking for this section? I think we're capturing the intent here. Is there another way to do it? So I guess I'm reaching out to the producer side that have problem with this chronic conflict zone section. And is any of this intent and objectives helping, from your perspective? Sammy.
I apologize. I had to step away for a second. Our hired guy showed up, so so I missed this conversation. But looking at what was captured on the paper, I'm not sure how much of that is different than what needs to be happening anyway. And that's my problem with this zone, having this section as a chronic conflict zone, is if there's these additional things that could be being done, why aren't they already previously being done? you know, accountability. That's one of those things that should be happening anyway, right? Like, I struggle with that. And if there's something that we're going to put in here that is, you know, like Rob just said, more demanding on the livestock community, I believe you just said that, Rob, maybe that wasn't, somebody just said more demanding on the livestock community. That's not fair. That's not going to work. That's not accountable and not shared through all of the communities. So, and all the people that are responsible for management. So I guess that's where my biggest struggle is, and I apologize for not hearing the entire conversation if that was already addressed.
Well, thanks, Sammy. I think you helped us understand your thinking and you answered the question. So thank you for that. Dave.
Well, I have to manage a lot of land, and you know, I'm really into cause and effect and trying to study what the cause is before I start applying a bunch of tools, or apply some tools and try it and see what happens. But just dealing with the symptom is not problem solving. You know, this should be about studying, trying to figure out what are causing these zones so that we don't have more zones into the future. And it should not be about trying to make the livestock community apply more tools. We can try some things. I'm not opposed to trying stuff, but the big deal is not the existing chronic zones, it's the future chronic zones that we could be creating out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Paula?
Yeah, I'll see you a couple things, both in response to Dave and Sammy and Dave. So while you were gone, it was clarified that we don't want this to just be about burdens on the producer, and that you're right, it isn't fair. So I just wanted you to know that there was agreement that the objective of doing something in this realm is for there to very much be shared burden, but really to provide more options and tools for ranchers, right? So not that you have to do things, but that these things should actually help you. And then let's see. To Dave's point, I completely agree with him that we should be looking at cause and effect. And I think we can do that at a couple different levels. And, you know, I think that if there are efforts by the department, and it sounds like there's some research by the Forest Service and, you know, research institutions to, you know, continue to look at, you know, so if there's like formal, long-term, ongoing, you know, some of it's research and some of it's just practical gathering lessons learned to try to figure out why these zones either exist or how to prevent them from coming up in the future, that kind of provides like a long-term framework, because sometimes I think those answers are going to take more than a season to come up with. But I think just in terms of this protocol and why maybe we wouldn't do these things everywhere is because I don't think these problems do pop up everywhere. And you know, even in the Rocky Mountains, not every pack you know, it's a minority of the packs that end up getting into trouble, and that's the pattern that we've seen here too. I mean, 85% last year, and you know, maybe we're on the same track to that this year. 85% of packs getting into trouble, and so if the department has limited time and resources, to me, one of the purposes of this section is, and I think Anne-Marie said this, is to focus those resources to say, hey, we were applying everything that we thought we had, or we were applying resources based on a, you know, a judicious sense of what we have, and if there weren't problems someplace and we were, you know, focusing over here, but we weren't getting it done. We tried to, but in retrospect, we weren't solving the problem. So now that we see that we have a problem, we really want to focus our attention on seeing what we can find out with cause and effect, seeing what innovation there are for tools, seeing what we can do to help ranchers. So it's, I mean, so Sammy, I hear what you're saying about why don't we do this everywhere? And I think the idea is that I don't think that there's resources to do it everywhere. I do imagine that there could be lessons learned that come out of it that could be applied to areas that are not yet chronic. But I do think we need to have some mechanism to focus on areas where attempts were made to solve the problem as it was evolving, but we didn't quite get there. So that means more attention needs to be put on it. So sorry if I went on too long, but I just wanted to address those 2 points.
Oh, thank you, Paula. All right, just to call on a few people here to get their thoughts. You know, Jess, what are you thinking so far?
Yeah, I see everybody's point, and I agree most of it. I understand nobody wants to have it to keep happening over and over again, but I'm afraid that and I understand where you're coming from, Paul, but I'm afraid if we address, you know, my community feels like that this kind of a thing is going to make it harder to go to lethal and get any relief whatsoever.
Right. Thank you, Jess. Steve, how about you? Any thoughts? Anne Marie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this is Trent. I just to respond to Jess, and I completely hear that fear. I just think the goal of this is kind of to recognize that repeated lethal control is not providing the relief that Jess is talking about. So it's kind of looking for other options in addition to lethal. But yeah, it's just specifically recognition that lethal removal hasn't provided that relief yet.
All right. We got to pause here, and we're coming up on public comment period at 11:30. One of the agenda items I wanted to go over with you has to do with meetings in the future. So I guess what I'd propose is let's pause here. Let me go over proposed meetings of the future. Let's do public comment. And then let me check back in with the group after the public comment period and kind of judge the appetite to not only continue this conversation, but also from our yesterday's conversation, do we want to spend time talking about when do we want this issue closed? When do we want to, you know, come up with the WAG recommendation? Because I think one of the things I heard yesterday is doing better at that. So that's my proposal. Lisa, you have your hand up?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I didn't mean to have it up. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I didn't realize I had it up.
That's all right. Okay. So I'm going to pull up a calendar for the meetings. Let me explain the calendar a little bit. Okay. So this is what sorry, I'm navigating my screen here. So this is what I try and use to schedule meetings. So you see the first 6 months of a calendar year across the top, the second 6 months on the bottom. I tried to capture the legislative session, the calving period, grazing season, hunting season. And then in some text there, I capture other notes I've made to try and accommodate WAG meetings. You'll see a red line between August and September. That's to show that beginning in September through December, that's still this current calendar year, while January through August on this calendar is talking about 2021. So the latest I had on proposed meeting dates, you can see in November. Typically, we've been meeting first week, of the months we have been meeting, but in November, that first week is taken up with the Washington Cattlemen's Convention. And then because of Veterans Day, I'm proposing that next meeting in November before, the week before Thanksgiving. In January, I think it sounds like we're going to miss Sammy. She's unavailable for 3 weeks. And then a note that Andy, he's busy with commission meetings Monday through Tuesday of all year round. And because of legislative session beginning in mid-January, that's why the proposal for early January. Now May, we didn't do May, well, we did March this past year, attempted to do April and did a May. But May, the original intent was to try and find the sweet spot between calving and grazing. But when I reflect on timeliness of any protocol changes, May doesn't really help us very much. And then August, reflects what next year might be for August. So these are the proposed dates. Asking for any immediate feedback now on potential adjustments. And of course, afterwards, after this meeting, I'm interested in your thoughts. So any comments on these dates? This is how they stand now. All right, Dave.
Yeah, some of us don't have the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Could you give us the dates, please?
Yeah, so right now the dates are showing November 18th and 19th of this year, January 6th and 7th of next year, May 5th and 6th of next year, August 4th and 5th of next year.
Thank you.
And Sammy, I thought I saw your hand. I don't know if you just put it down. Okay. And as usual, as we learn things and move forward, we can adjust as needed. But these will be the proposed dates. Okay. Let me stop sharing. So we got about 8 minutes before we go to public comment. How about we use this time to talk about when we want to close this chronic conflict zone issue. I think one of the goals is we as a group, have talked a couple years now, range riding and chronic conflict zones. We've expressed a desire to do better at setting a deadline for ourselves. So when we're talking chronic conflict zone here, I'm interested in your thoughts. And Sammy.
I was just going to make the question or pose the question, like the January meeting that I clearly will miss. If those happen to be the days that I'm driving, can we continue to make it so you could zoom in? I mean, I really think that everything's better in person, but is there a possibility to make it so this is still a platform?
I think the answer is yes, and we'll be glad to work with you to try and make that happen.
I like I said, obviously, I think it'd be better if everybody could make it in person, but those may be the days that we're driving to Denver and I could phone in. It'd be
Okay, sure. Be glad to try that. Tom. Tom, if you're talking. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So I just wanted, just quickly, November 18th will not likely work for me. I wasn't able to get into that last conversation. That's our annual meeting week. Now, I say that, and I don't know what we're going to do about our annual meeting this year, given the inability to meet in person. So, but I just wanted to flag that.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Lynn?
I think that it would be important to have a meeting between January and May, because we may have a lot to address from this grazing season, and we'll be right into the next grazing season in May if we don't get to address those issues, as well as finishing up the chronic conflict zone debate. So we could meet in January, April, and July instead, perhaps.
Okay. Just capturing that here. All right. Thank you, Lynn. Paula?
I support Lynn's suggestion. I think having some more meetings prior to the grazing season might be good if possible, especially if and we haven't had this discussion yet about, how much longer we're gonna be working on the protocol or when we're gonna close that off. But if we're gonna be continuing to talk about it with the intent of making some changes prior to next grazing season, then Lynn's suggestion makes sense. And then I just also wanted to note, I appreciate on the calendar that my limitations with overlap with Fourth Practices Board meetings are on there. But I will be, we can take that off for 2021 because my 10-year limit on serving on a public board is up at the end of December. So I'm rotating off the board at the end of this year.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Paula.
Yep.
All right. So I'll make those adjustments. From the producer side, I'm assuming calving season's pretty labor intensive and it needs your attention. So whether it's here now or in the future, guidance on how easy or hard it is for you to participate in those months would be helpful. All right, Sammy.
I forgot you called on me. I didn't unmute. February and March are typically really busy. For us, I would assume fairly close followed with Jess, but we can generally escape in April when the weather's a little better.
Okay. Thank you. Dan Paul.
Yeah, I just think this is just highlights our next topic, how important it is, right? That we need to, if we're gonna have limited meetings in the spring before next grazing season, then we should wrap up these outstanding major issues from this past year. So I should have a pretty firm time frame on, the chronic conflict zones.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. All right, let's see, just check in. Dave.
Yeah, I'm the same as Sammy. My calving season is March and April, but as you go into the season, it starts to slow down. So yeah, April 1st is still a little contentious, but as you get to mid-April, I can get out of here.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Tom?
First, I just want to say, Rob, did you really say the calving season was quote unquote labor intensive?
I did, Tom.
All right. my notes. I just wanted to clarify that that was true. So it's going to be, session's supposed to run through the end of April this year. I think it's, it may go into June. This could be an interesting session, but I think it's kind of like, as Dave talked about, as he gets later in his calving season, things slow down. I think a lot of the conversations are going to be taking place behind closed doors rather than in open public settings as the budget negotiators, work through that process. So I think we should be able to meet, and I think it will be important. The one thing I guess I would say is I'm a little concerned about setting a timeline or a deadline for when we reach agreement on this. I understand why, but in what we saw is what happened with range writing. I think getting it right is more important than getting it done by a set date. And we weren't ready to get it done right, I don't think, in the spring. It took more time. So I would just a caveat, I'm concerned about saying by June we'll have it done, because I don't know if can you predict that? But it's certainly a worthy goal.
Yeah. All right, Tom, thanks. Let's pause on that thought right now because we're going into public comment time period. And again, I'll re-engage the group after the public comment period to ask about appetite for spending more time today or not, but also a little more discussion on setting a timeline for our talk on chronic conflict zones. All right, so with that, we're going to switch to offer members of the public a chance to comment. So for members of the public, I'm going to ask Heather here shortly to share some instructions to help you provide comment if you'd like to. When you provide comment, it's typically just that, comments you would like the WAG members to hear. And it's not really a question and answer period. So wanted to kind of set that stage for you. So with that, Heather, want to share your instructions, please?
Sure. So we are now taking public comment from attendees. As a reminder, everyone is currently muted. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. If you're on the computer, the raise hand button appears under your name. If you're on the phone, please press *9 and wait to hear you have been unmuted. That is your indication it's your turn to speak. So the first person is Chris. Chris, you're now unmuted.
Great, thank you. I do want to, again, Chris Bachman with the Lands Council. I do want to thank Donnie for mentioning something earlier. There are groups that are actually out there working with the Forest Service to create more open space within the forest. We work at the project level to open up and restore historic meadows when there's a timber management project going on. So there are people out there trying to help solve this problem in innovative ways. Also, there's a lot of money available. I keep hearing about the burden with chronic conflict on the producer. There's an agricultural grant that supports this. There was $320,000 from the general fund that was appropriated for conflict in the kettles. And that was done because it's an area of chronic conflict. My next piece is a comment that I want the WAG to hear, and it's not a question. Don DeShiel offered a new and innovative idea that he would like to share, and no one wanted to hear it, and I want to hear it. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Don. Hopefully he'll share his idea. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I'm going to keep going down the list of public comment to let the others talk. So Heather, you want to go to the next person, please?
It helps if I'm unmuted. Eileen, you are the next person and you are unmuted.
She looks still muted.
Yeah. Eileen, I just asked you to unmute. So it's on your end.
So is it something she'll have to do on her end?
Correct. Oh, there she is.
Good
Okay.
morning. My name is Eileen Levy. I'm a rancher from Klickitat and Clark counties. We run about anywhere from 800 to 1,600 head of cattle. We do spring, summer grazing. Irrespective of that, I wanted to comment most specifically about the issues around the quote conflict zone. I think it's a matter of semantics. The issue is related to the killing of livestock by wolves, and then ultimately, in many cases, the ultimate killing of wolves as a response to that issue. As I've shared with Donnie Mortarello back in 2016, I think, one of the issues most specifically related to the timing and the event related to a wolf kill when a cattle go out on grazeland is that if you don't catch the first sighting of the wolf in the cattle territory, you're already behind the 8 ball. You have to catch it early, and we have never, in all the years as I was raised on a ranch with my parents and then having my own land holdings and ranching holdings, we've never lost an animal to a predator, and we have lots of predators. We have the occasional wolf, we have lots of coyotes, cougars, bear, etc. So unless you've got people out there who are watching and waiting for the predators to arrive, you're going to be behind the 8 ball every time. And I know for a fact that the state is never going to have enough people to have range riders or whatever you want to call them to be out there in a timely fashion. And it requires herding of the animals 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You have to know where the animals are. You have to know the lay of the land. You have to know where the predators, if they have dens or whatever, you have to know where those are located. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you have the manpower out there. Now, this is the clincher. I know that the folks who have grazing rights don't ever want to give that up. It's been a very profitable and very sustainable way of life for them for well over 100 years. But this isn't the wild, wild west anymore. If they are not willing or capable of taking care of watching and guarding their animals, if they're putting them out in harm's way, then they're going to have to bite the bullet. Conversely, if people want to have wild animals in wild places, they have to understand that there are people who are making their livelihood in those wild places. So you're going to have to meet where the problems lie and get over the semantics and stop belly aching about whether we call it chronic or whether we call it killing or whether we call it depredation. The facts remain, if you're in any way, shape, or fashion schooled in animal husbandry, the predators are always going to go for cattle first. Specifically, they love sheep and lamb. They love hogs. They go for the animal fat. And there is very low animal fat in the ungulates. And you could put a field of deer or elk right beside a herd of cattle, and the predators would go for the cattle every time. Okay, I've given you a 2-minute schooling on animal husbandry and wild animal behavior. Take it or leave it. I just wanted to share that with you. After my 73 years, I've seen a few things. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Chris, I think we see you on the list, but because you just talked, I want to get through everyone else on the list, and we can come back to you afterwards. So Heather, why don't we go to the next person, please?
Sure. The next person on the list is Ronald. Ronald, you are unmuted. Please unmute yourself.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The removal of Tim Coleman from the WAG is an outrage, in my opinion. Tim was the only voice that people like my wife and I, and a great majority of Washingtonians had that truly represented us. We who want our wildlife to flourish, and we who want cows off of our public lands. Tim truly represented us when it came to our endangered Washington wildlife. You claim that the reason for his removal was because of something he did over a year ago. It's clear to me and to many of my colleagues that the department has now made it clear that it will not tolerate dissent. Tim said and did nothing against the WAG, but commented against actions by the department that so many of us oppose. The entire WAG process seems to be a scheme to suppress public protest and open comment. It's heavily weighted with hunters and ranchers and the conservation groups, besides Tim's Kettle Range Conservation Group, absolutely do not represent people like me, my wife, and my colleagues that are commenting here today. The department refuses to put the protocol through rulemaking and public comment and insists that the WAG is a good substitute because it represents a diversity of views. Like I already pointed out, there is not a representative diversity of views on the WAG. Even before Tim was fired, the entire WAG structure was lopsided, with hunters and ranchers getting 2/3 of the representation and the vast majority of Washington citizens who care about protecting wildlife getting only 1/3. That leads the department to getting a lopsided and inaccurate view of what is important to the people of the state of Washington. To make that even worse, many environmental groups will not participate on the WAG because they are not willing to give up their First Amendment rights in exchange for a seat at the table. Many of the groups that remain are those that have been willing to back the department through thick and thin. Conservation Northwest even filed a declaration and brief in court supporting the department's decision to kill the injured Togo wolf in 2018. There's an obvious double standard here. It's okay to participate in litigation as a WAG member as long as it's on the side of the department. So the department has now made clear that it means what it says with the WAG gag order. If you speak out against the department and on behalf of wolves, you will be dismissed from the WAG, and your voice and the voice of the people you represent will be effectively silenced. I can guarantee you that our voices will not be silenced. We will find new ways to speak out, even if the WAG excludes us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, our next person is Steph. Steph, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Steph.
Great. Thank you. Let me just close out a window here. Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Taylor, and I'm the programs manager for the Northwest Animal Rights Network, which is a Seattle-based animal advocacy organization, and we have more than 5,000 members across Washington. We want to voice our concerns, which have been completely ignored by the department. We are troubled that the WAG and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife have yet to take any of the majority of Washingtonians' comments into perspective and have completely ignored the governor's ask of figuring out your process and to stop killing wolves. My organization has written to the department, and we have not received a response to our comment when requested. There's been zero response to our members' comments. We watched yesterday as the majority of the public comments were critical of the WAG, and they were repeatedly silenced, even when within their allotted time. If the department is going to claim that it doesn't need to go through a rulemaking process because the WAG meetings allow for robust public involvement, then it needs to walk its talk. The department and the WAG are not held accountable to the public. The WAG has never been about fair public process, but removing the key conservation stakeholder from the WAG has put a wedge in the public trust of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And yes, that pun was intended, since the department is incrementally destroying the wedge pack. We recognize that some of the WAG members take this process seriously and do work hard to come to a consensus within the rest of the group. We recognize that this is particularly difficult, even when the WAG is heavily weighed in favor of ranching and hunting interests. I want to talk about Tim Coleman's dismissal from the WAG. Year after year, the department has prioritized private interests in the Kettle Ridge, and now the agency has silenced the entire conservation community in Northeast Washington and has removed the only true conservation organization on the WAG. Does this mean that all WAG members now have a gag order in place and are not allowed their First Amendment right? Do all the WAG members agree to this? With no rule or agreed upon process for removing members, you kicked off a high-functioning member of the WAG when we watched you waste so much time each WAG meeting prioritizing and hand-holding other WAG members through how to read an email. The public is capable of reading and commenting on these issues, but some WAG members can't even read and understand a document ahead of the meeting. This is a problem. It slows down the process, and these are simply not the people we want making decisions about wildlife in our state. If you want to call a wolf, the department is a good old boys club which represents good old ranching interests. The protection of private ranching interests is rooted in deep colonialist ideals which place value on sanitizing the wilderness from all that is native and wild, and the department uses taxpayers' dollars to uphold and carry out these colonial ideals, such as hunting wolves from a helicopter and using Judas wolves. The department has worked really hard to maintain the status quo, to eradicate native populations, and to try to bring Washingtonians along as you drift backward in time against updated science, progressive policy, and equity and inclusion. The department has a long way to go to be representative of Washington's rich conservation history and diverse constituents. The WAG is the same. It is not representative of BIPOC or LGBTQ folks, and the department management is no different. The WAG does not represent all Washington constituents, but only a small minority of vastly diverse population, of our vastly diverse population. We would like to see the WAG shake off its cobweb members who repeatedly hold back the processes from moving forward, and we would like to see a public apology owed to Tim from the WAG and the department. Also, yep, I'm done. Also, y'all need a note taker because the facilitator should not be the note taker so that you can all focus on moving the process forward. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Steph.
All right. The next person to speak is Jocelyn. Jocelyn, you're unmuted.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to comment today. I'm Jocelyn LaRue, and I'm the Washington, Montana Director for Western Watersheds Project. First of all, I'm going to echo what the majority of public commenters yesterday and today said, in that I'm incredibly disheartened by the dismissal of Tim Coleman. Based on what we heard yesterday and my own experience with the WAG, Tim had a vital role in the WAG, and without his voice, many members of the public are not represented. As many of you know, a group of us submitted a rulemaking petition to the Fish and Wildlife Commission that would provide an opportunity for public involvement in the rulemaking process. When recommending that the Fish and Wildlife Commission deny this petition, Donnie stated that the WAG was a better way to include broad public input. This already seemed like a questionable stance, but the removal of Tim immediately prior to key votes makes it clear that the department is actually just trying to silence this conservation perspective. Yesterday's antics made this even more clear when several commenters were cut off. If this is truly the opportunity for robust public involvement that the department claims it is, then public comment periods following controversial conversations and decisions should not be so limited. As a final note, when it comes to range riding expectations, near daily is not good enough. As someone said yesterday, wolves don't take days off, and if the department is going to waste its limited budget on helicopter kill attempts, there should be stricter requirements for ranchers to protect their own private property. Something that has repeatedly come up and has been a focus of the last few days is the idea that producers shouldn't be managing wildlife. It needs to be recognized that asking producers to employ proactive techniques to protect livestock is not asking producers to manage wolves, it's asking producers to manage their livestock. As long as the department keeps killing wolves, as several WAG members clearly want, even when the producers fail to manage livestock, there will be no incentive to protect livestock by accepting innovation and employing proactive non-legals. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
The next speaker is Sophia. Sophia, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. As you all know, my name is Sophia Ressler, and I'm the Washington Wildlife Advocate and a staff attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm going to speak a little bit more to a high-level concern that I notice that repeatedly occurs within these group discussions. I believe I've stated this point before, but it seems worth repeating. There are lots of conversations occurring with the false narrative of the department forcing or requiring livestock owners to do something regarding their husbandry techniques. I don't think anyone here is under the impression that the department has the authority to require private livestock operations to implement anything. What the department does have complete control over is when taxpayer money is used to kill a state endangered species. So that means that the department can choose not to kill a wolf when a livestock owner has decided not to implement the techniques that the department has the authority to require if they are going to use the state's resources to kill that wolf. Because, again, the department has complete control over when they kill wolves for conflict with livestock. This seems to be a simple concept, yet it feels that it gets skirted around a lot during these meetings. So I'd urge the department and the WAG to stop considering that they don't have control over what the livestock owners must implement. If a livestock owner does not want to implement the necessary deterrence measures to stop these conflicts, especially in chronic conflict zones, then the department has complete control over whether they go in and kill a native species. Not only a native species, but one that provides incredible ecosystem benefits and has every right to be on the land that they've inhabited for millennia. You're dealing with three parties here: humans, domesticated livestock, and a wild animal. It seems pretty obvious which ones you have control over. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia.
All right, the next speaker is David. David, you are unmuted. You may need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I did that successfully. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to say, I've really become very disappointed in the department recently, and it seems to be escalating over time, particularly the issues this week. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here waiting for the next email with the update on Washington wolves, which is going to say, well, we've killed all of the wedge back now, so we've done our job. So to my friends on the environmental contingent of the WAG, I think the actions of the department this week speak volumes about its true agenda. Defend our wildlife too much and you're frozen out. Have a different opinion? Then yield that for the need to get along. Speak your mind and the department will ignore you. The agenda is clear. Sacrifice the life of wolves and commercial interests. Stop and think about the makeup of this group. 4% of the state's population controls a supermajority of the seats. This is a calculus you will never overcome. You will continue to be forced to betray your principles to satisfy a consensus rule and then be required to defend that capitulation to me and my community. You're being fed bromides such as killing wolves will save them. Killing wolves will develop public acceptance. Killing wolves will not harm their recovery. Killing wolves is just, quote, removing, harvesting, euthanizing, or other such bloodless euphemisms. These are all false. Look at what you've already bought into. That there is some behavioral connection between an incident today and one from 10 months ago? Absurd. That incremental killing of wolves will reduce conflict? Of course not. It will increase conflict. That part-time range riders are adequate to prevent conflict? Of course not. That standard operating procedures conducted by ranchers somehow qualify as proactive, non-lethal deterrence. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing and not much more. That an outside group which proclaims that its goal is to find more depredations, not to stop them, in order to move the department toward killing wolves. That the department's range riders can't move cattle to avoid conflict, yet the ranchers' range riders refuse to move them. These are not solutions. The department has blamed wolves in the past for depredations because cattle were turned out on a rendezvous site, cattle were lost in deep snow and freezing temperatures, cattle wandered off their grazing location, a cow fell down a ravine, a 1 1/2 week old calf was killed on Forest Service land. This is human carelessness. My fellow environmentalists, with all of these concessions, what one thing have you accomplished to save our endangered wolves? You're being co-opted by the department and being used as a fig leaf to justify their persecution of wolves. Will you now countenance the morally bankrupt idea of collaring wolves in order to kill them? My voice is muted, so I'm asking you to speak up for me. The governor told the department to stop killing wolves and come up with a workable plan to stop the conflict. It has done neither. The killing continues, and the deeply flawed protocol has seen no meaningful changes to address the issue. My friends, you must stand up against this madness and demand serious discussion about how the conflict will be resolved to stop the killing. The status quo is simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right, the next person is Wes. Wes, you are now unmuted.
Hello, Wes, can you hear us? Wes, if you're talking, whoa.
It looks like Wes just got taken off the list. He may have lost connectivity. Oh, there he is.
He's got his hand up again. How about we try it again?
Yeah, let me get him. All right, Wes, it looks like you may have to unmute on your end.
Okay, we see you're unmuted, Wes. I just don't think we can hear you right now. So Wes, we're gonna move to the next person, and if you want to keep your hand up, we'll try again after we get through the list.
All right. The next person is Pamela. Pamela, I have unmuted you.
Thank you. Pamela Williams here. Early on in the meeting, there was an assertion that swift killing of wolves increases social tolerance and respect for the law. I think that that's totally false, and I'm a little bit puzzled because I'm a hobbyist at this. I'm interested in the subject, but I'm not a professional. I don't study the literature or anything else, and I've come across studies to totally debunk that. So I am confused and puzzled why the professionals on this team would let that stand. I suggest that you either prove it or remove it as one of the justifications for swift killing of wolves. Secondly, I'm troubled by the idea of deterrence in the chronic zones or in any other context. What I learned yesterday from the meeting is that deterrents are simply vague descriptions of practices that are applied inconsistently, inadequately, and because of the lack of accountability, they may be called deterrents, but they may be absent altogether. So that needs to change. And I came up with another example to illustrate my point. If I closely supervise my toddler 4 or 5 days of the week and let him do whatever he wants out of sight for the remaining days, what kind of an outcome could I expect? This is really stating the obvious here, but the expectation that you're going to teach wolves different behavior is ludicrous. Especially on public lands, it is the producers that are going to have to change their behavior. I realize that it's a burden to change their practices and step up to the plate, but if you want a solution, that's what's going to have to happen. And finally, having spent the last 20 years in Idaho, to any of you that think it's a good idea to emulate Idaho wildlife management or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service management as exhibited in Idaho, you are delusional. The only solution that they ever came up with and that they embrace is killing. Every problem that comes up, killing is the solution. Please do not use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
All right, so Wes is back up there. It looks like I'm going to ask him to unmute. At the very bottom of your screen, there should be a ribbon. On the far left is a mute button. You pin him up. There you go. Nope, he just muted again. All right, I'm going to go on to Zoe. Zoe, you are unmuted.
Hi, everyone. This is Zoe Hanley, wildlife biologist and Northwest representative with Defenders of Wildlife. I was meeting with ranchers and range riders in Oregon yesterday and missed most of yesterday's WAG meeting, but I wanted to provide public comment on what I heard was accomplished yesterday and on what I've heard so far today. I'd like to congratulate the WAG for approving the range riding language and roles and responsibilities yesterday. However, it's unfortunate that this group could not coalesce to approve range riding language prior to the grazing season because this framework would have provided range riding managers and ranchers with a clear understanding of what is expected prior to having boots on the ground, and could have prevented the death of the non-breeding female from the wedge pack. I expect that this range riding language will inform WDFW's decision to go lethal in the future and to hold everyone involved accountable for their role in reducing or exacerbating a conflict. Jess said yesterday that it would take a huge number of people to cover the hundreds of cattle on grazing allotments in the wedge, and he's right. So why are there only 1 or 2 range riders on the ground in this chronic conflict zone, and the agency deemed that sufficient coverage to issue lethal control? This just highlights the need for communication, collaboration, and innovation between ranchers, range riders, WDFW, and the Forest Service to provide sufficient range riding coverage, have the ability to move cattle out of high-use wolf areas that have seen recurring conflict, even if it's just to another pasture within the allotment, and apply strategic grazing practices that reduce cattle vulnerability to predation. Reducing chronic wolf livestock conflicts requires integrity and complete collaboration from all parties involved, which Julia briefly mentioned today, and I completely agree with that, and that should be the intent of the chronic conflict zone section of the Wolf Livestock Interaction Protocol. Regarding the WAG's involvement in the post-recovery planning, there appears to be great excitement within WDFW to receive feedback from WAG members, and that it will be heavily considered during the SEPA process. I expect that the department will consider the WAG's recommendations with the same level of consideration that you afford non-WAG organizations and individual members of the general public. And lastly, I was surprised to hear of Tim Coleman's dismissal from the WAG, and I want to thank him for his years of service to this group. I urge the department and Director Suswin to provide answers to the questions raised during yesterday's and today's public comment periods about the timing of Tim's dismissal, WAG member behavioral protocol, or potentially lack thereof, and the reasons behind his dismissal. I also request that the department strongly consider the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as you look to fill Tim's position. So thank you for your time and for the opportunity to provide public comment.
Thank you, Zoe. All right, Heather, are you muted again?
Yes, I am. Martha Hall is our next person. Martha, I'm going to ask you to unmute your mic.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Martha.
Yes, I'd like to finish what we ran out of time yesterday for public comment, so I didn't finish. I'd like to start with the comment that to remind you that less than 5% of the public in the state buys hunting licenses, fewer probably raise livestock. I find it rather odd that your schedule of something as important as WAG meetings to talk about protocol in chronic areas takes into consideration hunting season when 5% or less of the people are involved in this recreation. It's another indication of how far away from the public this department and WAG is. I'd also like to remind you that as a public trust asset, wildlife was supposed to be managed by the department using the best available science. How often does WAG really discuss the best science when discussing protocols or the chronic zones? How many WAG members even know or care about the best science, what the best science might tell us? Like the rolling windows of 10 months. What science is that based on? What pack members are even there in 10 months? And yet depredations are blamed on them. And when do wolves most often hunt? Between 9 and 5 when the range riders might be out somewhere? I'd like to also today mention that raising livestock is a business and producers should be treated as such. They're running businesses. Other businesses are expected to protect their inventory, absorb what is called acceptable losses, which happen in any business, and purchase insurance at competitive rates. Whether the inventory is jewelry, trucks, or livestock, shouldn't the public expect the same from the livestock industry? But no, The protocol in DFW do not consider livestock industry as a business. We have a producer who repeatedly turns out close to 2,000 animals in the Kettle Range every summer. We're told that each one of these animals is worth $1,000 or more. What does the DFW's wolf livestock protocol require of this producer? Is he expected to know where all 22,000 animals are at any given time? No, he doesn't know where they all are. He knows where some of them are. Is he expected to check each of the 200 animals at least once a day? No, because he doesn't know where they are. He checks some days. Is this adequate? Would this pass in any other business with an inventory? Is the rancher expected to know when one of his animals is killed or injured? No. Instead, the protocol only allows the rancher to leave the animals out there. They become bait, and this is legal and okay in the protocol. It's not called baiting. Does the protocol require accountability and documentation to the public for how producers protect their animals? This might include requirements for GPS on range riders and on livestock, daily records on how many of the total animals, what percent are actually even seen, let alone checked every single day to see if they're alive and not injured and healthy and good weight. Is this required? No.
Excuse me, Martha.
When DFW kills wolves, the public is simply told that the producer had range riders. They use deterrence. Yes.
Yeah, excuse me, Martha. I was going to ask if you could finish with your key points so we could, there's another member that would like to say something. And if you'd like more time, we can put you back at the end of the line afterwards.
I'll take that. That's fine. I'll come back at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Our next speaker is Rachel. Rachel, you are unmuted, but you will need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Rachel.
All right, I'm going to be real brief. I appreciated Martha's comment, and I hope she gets time to complete her statement. Overall, regarding today's meeting, I did appreciate Paula's attempts to moderate the discussions. I think that was very helpful. I also appreciated Trent's point that lethal control isn't working, and I'm troubled that the department continues to spend so much time and money on something that clearly is not working, and that many in the ranching community continue to call for the killing of wolves, which again is not working. I do wonder about what the attendance requirements are for the WAG, as it seems that at least one member did not participate either day. And finally, I hope that the WAG will consider adding someone to the committee that is from a more traditionally underrepresented group. I can't really see all of you, but it appears that the committee is entirely made of white people, and Washington is certainly not an all-white state. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So Heather, how about we, let's give Chris some more time and then we'll go back to Martha.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chris.
Yeah, again, I know we're not supposed to ask questions, and what I was asking was not a question. It was to hear Don's comment on his innovative idea. He offered it twice. There were no takers on the WAG, and I'd really like to hear it.
All right, thank you, Chris. Martha? Let's see here. Heather, can you help Martha?
Absolutely. Martha, I believe you're muted.
Yes, I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Martha.
Okay, I was on that the public, when DFW is killing wolves, the public is not told any of the details about the deterrence. We're supposed to just believe they were adequate. We do no longer have access to depredation reports. That ended after 2016. We would like to see depredation reports before wolves are killed. Those should be made available to the public. Most business would expect heavy losses if they manage their inventory as livestock producers do. But no, the protocol after only a few livestock are injured or killed says that the public asset, which is wolves, wildlife, can be killed and the public picks up the bills. The public also pays for collaring wolves. So wolf collar data will help ranchers find his dead and injured livestock so that the public access wolves can be more easily killed. Wouldn't it make more sense to the public and for the public tax dollar for the rancher to collar and track livestock rather than wolves? How does collaring wolves really benefit the public and wolves? The public is also asked to pay for range riders, for DFW staff, for the insurance for insured and dead wolves. We pay for WAG. We pay to manage the public lands where the livestock graze and where the wolves live much of their lives. And yet I keep hearing that the public's not really a stakeholder. We don't have any skin in the game. The DFW is a state agency, certainly functions like this is true. Most of our values are not reflected by DFW staff, commissioners, or WAG appointments. WAG members aren't required to talk with us or convey our ideas. I'm not sure who they think they represent. And now with Tim removed, I don't know who represents me. I find all of this very troublesome, and I don't know when anything will change, but in the years I've been watching wolf management, it's only gotten worse and the transparency becomes less. And it's been very disappointing.
All right. Thank you, Martha. Okay, I think that that covers our public comment period. So back to the group. Well, first, thank you, members of the public, for your comment. It does force us to hear that, to think it, to consider it, and we certainly leave here, I know I certainly do, thinking about everything you're saying, so I appreciate you taking the time. All right, members of the group, you know, we're scheduled to close now, but I guess I want to get some guidance from you and your thoughts on a time we want to spend. One issue to talk about is, do we send a time, do we try and set a timeline for our chronic conflict zone issue? And then we could certainly spend time continuing the discussion on the intent and goal of that language to help us further that. And also wanted to check in with availability of people, because we set the agenda, the end around noon. I don't know if other members have set up obligations around that. So it's kind of a check-in there. And I wanted to ask any recommendations from members of the group. Nobody. Lynn.
I'm willing to take a break and come back and talk more. I feel like we're just leaving this hanging for the rest of the grazing season otherwise.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Dave? Dave, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I've kind of scheduled my afternoon thinking we'd be done around noon.
All right. Thank you, Dave. All right. If we take so I think we'd miss Dave. If we take well, I guess I'm throwing it. Well, Tom, you've got your hand up, so maybe you'll buy my time to think as I listen to you. Go ahead, Tom.
I just need to say I have a 1 o'clock. I have another work group that I serve on that starts at 1, so I will not be available this afternoon. You know, I think we've had some great discussion, and maybe one option is to allow staff or a subgroup of the WAG members to put some words around those concepts, and then we forward that back out to us, and we meet, as soon as we can in the near future. But then we have a concept, a skeleton in a sense, to steer our conversation.
All right, thank you, Tom. Donnie?
Yeah, I was gonna, Tom said it. I wonder if we should let this marinate a little bit. Also, you've heard me say this morning that, the length of these meetings can start to wear on you. It doesn't get you in the best place to kind of problem solve. So I would second what Tom said.
Thank you, Donnie. Paula?
Yeah, I like that idea of seeing if another subgroup can tackle some language. But one of the concerns I have, and so this is not counter to that idea, but it should be in consideration of the subgroup. So I feel like several of us on the conservation side, plus several department staff, reiterated that the point of the chronic conflict zone was not to make ranchers' lives harder. And then I kept hearing ranchers say, in so many words, essentially, we don't believe you, or we don't believe that it's possible to construct a section like that doesn't make our lives harder. And so that disconnect is, so I'm just pointing out that there's a disconnect. And I'm wondering if someone from the producer community would volunteer to be on that committee to see if they can come up with language that helps break through that. If there's a way to describe the intent, but have words in there that addresses their concern, and see if that's a way to get through it. So anyway, that would be one of my requests for doing this. I think it's a great idea to have people go away and try, but it still seems like we don't have we don't have cohesion, or we don't have trust and intent, I guess.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Dan?
Yeah. So clearly we're not going to be able to tackle this without another sort of crack at it, which I understand. I think at the very least, we need to have this solved before next year. And so I would just propose a drop dead date to adopt what we've come up with by February or March of next year. So well in advance of the grazing season, but I can't see this lingering for another year and getting to the spring and then pushing it off because grazing season started again. So I know we need to work on it this fall, but I think we need to commit to working on it and getting it a real agreed upon time frame to adopt it.
Thank you, Dan. Sammy?
Wes just sent me a message, and he is called in on a phone number if you were still willing to take his public comment. He figured out how to call in because he couldn't figure out how to make his microphone on his computer work.
Anybody on the group mind if let's finish the hands here, and then let's break and give Wes an opportunity, and then we'll finish up.
It's 4242 is the last four on his number.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sammy. Is there anything else, or did you just want to share that with us?
Okay. Yeah, that was my thought.
All right, Don? Don, if you're talking, we can't hear you. All right, Don, I see you're unmuted, but we still can't hear you. All right, Don, I'm gonna go to Diane, and we can try again later. Diane?
Yeah, I like the idea of having a subgroup kind of work through this, and I think we definitely need some livestock producers as part of that conversation. And I too have meetings this afternoon, and even if I didn't, I think I would have a hard time continuing much longer today.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you, Diane. Don, one more shot. Can you talk and see if we can hear you?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So for some reason I had to stick these headphones on, but so I suppose my computer didn't know it was supposed to pick me up.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not available this afternoon for any more. I have a insurance board meeting and another meeting with, some other stuff. I just say I'll use this as my checkout time because I'm going to. I do appreciate the public comment. I feel like it's the most interesting part of the whole meeting. And yes, Chris, I do have an innovative and creative solution that I'm refining and will be happy to share when there's more time to do it. I don't think it'll be helpful for this grazing season, although it could, but yeah, I think most anything, documents or whatever you work on today isn't going to change anything that's happening on the ground this year. It's long gone down the trail, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Don. So for the group, how about let's go to Wes, see if we can give Wes some time to share his comment. And when we come back, let's try and identify that subgroup so we can, and then we'll wrap up after that. All right, so Heather, do you want to see if you can help out Wes?
All right, Wes, I have you unmuted.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you, Wes.
Sorry for the inconvenience of me trying to figure out how to work my computer, I guess. This is my first time jumping in and observing or keying in on a Zoom meeting, so I appreciate the time and for you guys letting me come back to me after public comment. I just give you a little bit of history. I live in Southeast Washington. I'm an insurance guy, office guy, involved in the community, Lions Club, so forth. Anyway, I would just like to get back a little bit and comment that sorry, I'm having bleed over from my laptop. Let me see if I can opt out of there.
Even if you can't, Wes, I think we can hear you clear enough.
Okay. I deal with a few people, visit with them over in our other meetings that I'm involved with, and some of the public people that I deal with wonder why, sorry, it's just bleeding over into one ear into the other. Anyway, trying to get the wolves diversified through the state and so that we can get a better handle on control and mitigating between producers and livestock as a whole and the wolf problem as a whole. And we don't seem to be able to do that until we can get all the packs and all the zones and breeding pairs and so forth. It just seems like part of the state doesn't have any, part of the state is getting very impacted, both producer-wise and trickle-down money, hunting, fishing, people in the outdoors, huckleberry picking, whatever it may be. And I noticed that, and Bill made that comment about translocating, and I just wanted to let the WAG know, and in my comment, that I think that's, from what I'm hearing from the friends and associates that I deal with, they're very supportive of that to try and even out the burden that's being faced on a particular part of the state, where the other part of the state where we're trying to get wolves established in the other zones isn't really happening. That's for my first go round and my first involvement in one of these. I'll just kind of leave it at that and let you guys get on with finishing up. I know you're a little bit over your time slot, but thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'll try and have my computer system working a little bit better for my next attempt at this, but I do very much appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Wes. Thank you. Okay, group, team, any volunteers, for this subgroup? Anybody'd like to participate? And of course, ideally, we'd like representatives from each of the different perspectives. And I see Lynn, you got your hand up. I don't know if you're volunteering or if you would have to make a comment.
I'm volunteering.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So Lynn's volunteer. I know I think it is prudent to have a producer viewpoint on this subgroup as well. Sammy, are you making a comment or are you volunteering?
I'll volunteer if nobody else that's better at words than I am wants to, but
Okay.
I agree there needs to be a producer on the subgroup.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Donnie?
I'm not volunteering, but I wonder, we are missing some staff here today, but I'd want to just, if, you know, hold a spot for, I'd like to grab somebody from our northeastern area where we've had some of these areas. And so
Okay.
just want to offer that up.
I can do it.
All right, thank you, Donnie. Lisa?
I'll volunteer.
Okay. And you know, I think we got the different perspectives represented. Sammy?
At the fear of not being diverse enough, we should probably have a male on this group.
Oh. Okay. You know, we have, we have that, whoever the staff person is in the Northeast might be able to do that, but thanks, Sammy. All right. I don't see any volunteers. How about we start with that 4, and if others would like to join, you know, just contact me. I'll reach out to you 4 to help organize the group and help us get started. So I'll take that on. Any other questions or concerns before we go ahead, Sammy?
I guess I would like a little bit of a briefing from the group. Are you wanting us to take and make new chronic conflict zone language, or are you wanting us to work from what is existing? What is the clear direction as far as where you want us to go and take this? Maybe everybody else understood that, but I guess I didn't.
Okay. I could take a shot at it, Sammy, and give something for the members to correct me with. So today we had language that has been worked on over the past months, but didn't quite make it. You know, we got into discussion of whether or not we needed a chronic conflict zone. And then we've got notes now on the intent or goal of a chronic conflict zone section. So I think the ask is kind of open-ended, where to meet the intent, you know, what words, parts can we add to the protocol that would meet the intent? Doesn't necessarily have to be a chronic conflict zone section. And I think that's the struggle. I don't think anyone has a perfect idea what that looks like yet. And the group might be looking for this subgroup to come up with a recommendation. So team, that was my best attempt at what I thought I heard. Can anyone offer any better guidance? Diane?
That's what I heard too.
All right. Paula?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I just in case I missed the intent. I mean, I do think trying to start over with language is a good idea, just because people seem to have gotten wrapped around the axle or had different interpretations of intent of the language that's out there now. So I think taking the objective stuff that we wrote down, and you know, all 4 of you that have been listening to the conversation, seeing if you can start over. And I want to reiterate my request, and since you're the producer representative, Sammy, is looking for language that will help give you certainty about the positive intent that's been expressed, you know, that this is to
to help producers with more tools, not create more burdens. So that's just my personal request to the group.
Thank you, Paula. Sammy, is that enough for you? We'll find out. Is that is that the shrug? And I'll see if I can help the group as well. All right. I think we're at time, or why don't we go through a round of checkouts? And let's see, got my list. I guess I've been reverse ordering it. So once again, thanks for thanks for the incredibly diverse perspectives, viewpoints, struggles. It's really amazing, and I appreciate how respectful you've been with each other and all those. I also just wanted to take the time to thank, we got Nikki and Heather, their first time helping us run Zoom for the WAG, so thank you too. And Katie, first time with notes, thank you. And then Julia really helped out yesterday. My computer died, and so she had to be the one to bring up all the documents. So shout out to you, Julia. So again, I'm appreciative, thanks, and looking forward to working with you in the future. So next, Dan Brinson. Dan, I don't know if he's still, there he is.
I am. Yeah, so for checkout, I guess I would just offer that, the diversity of opinions are really showing, and that's not a bad thing. I think some of the, harmony of a group may kind of dissipate with our whole COVID scenario, and not being able to have the interactions that we've enjoyed in the past. So I think that this is a temporary phase, probably, that this group is going through, and would anticipate that harmony returning when we can finally all meet again.
Thank you, Dan. Now, Don, I think you said you were going to use your last comment as your checkout, but I still see you on the screen. All right, so I think I just got waved off. So thank you, Don. Donnie.
Yes, I thought a good second day. Couple reactions. One is, I heard a couple times today, folks bring up stuff that I felt like we had a safe place today. I heard folks bring up stuff that they felt like maybe they're a little worried bringing up, kind of a reality check, and you did, and it was received, and you guys worked through it. I saw you go into problem solving mode, which was just great, and it's so nice to see. I wanted to hang on. I got things going off here. Sorry.
Oh, you're beeping.
Yeah, I'm beeping. That's Teams for you. I want to comment a little bit on the public comment section. It's always great to hear from the public, and I did, after yesterday's thought about, and I take a lot of this stuff to bed and thinking about it and all that kind of stuff, and it's in my head that we are not fully functioning right now in this Zoom capacity. Normally, we would have a morning session to be able to stand in the hallway and talk with our publics and do all that, and we're missing that. So I'm very anxious to get back to that in a meeting in person, and I'll also be thinking about if there are ways to further kind of fill that gap somehow in this new interface platform that we're doing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then also, sorry, I'm a little long-winded here. It's important to me. To our public, we in WAG, we have a set of ground rules that we have and that we do our very best to honor, and it talks about being respectful and assuming the best in everybody and that kind of stuff. I did hear one thing in the public comments today that kind of I perked up a little bit. using the word delusional towards a WAG member. It wasn't super direct, but I made the connection. So I just wanted to share that and just acknowledge that, if you could, public, and do your best also to kind of those kinds of process steps and ground rules to help continue to have this safe space. We're all here to try to do better on this issue, and having that respect and assuming the best in people is very, very important. And then lastly, I think Ron said in the public comment section, or maybe it was, I can't remember who, but or Lynn or David about worried about the next update that's coming out. So I just wanted to let folks know that Director Suswin has not made a decision yet on wedge or lead point. I think you are going to see an update coming out, but I think you already heard it in this yesterday's meeting. There'll be an update coming out today that talks about the recent depredation activity in the wedge, so that the bigger public is aware of that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that one as well. So thank you for the meeting. I'm excited for the small group to further work on this.
Thanks, Donnie. Lisa?
Again, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think I did finally solve, or at least I got better service today. Yes, I think that the one thing about this group that's always nice, we do tackle difficult subjects, and it always seems to get frustrating, but in the end, we almost always do come to that consensus. And I think with this subgroup that I'm going to be part of, that's the thing I like about them, is we have those diverse views, but it's an opportunity to have kind of a more personal way of doing things. That's the problem with these Zoom meetings, is we just don't have that personal touch. And like Donnie said, you can't talk to members of the public at our breaks, whatever spectrum of the aisle you're on, and it's very frustrating. So hopefully sometime soon we can maybe meet in person and get back to how we usually do things. That's it.
Thank you, Lisa. Anne Marie.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually glad to not have to sit here for a bunch more hours. But with that said, I guess I do get a little anxious. I think it is really good that everyone finally agreed on range rider language. But I think about how long that took, and I think about it being August now, and if we want to implement anything that maybe is identified in a chronic conflict zone, I mean, we're going to have to do that well before the beginning of next grazing season. And so I am anxious about the pace in which sort of consensus has been built lately. But yeah, I guess it just is what it is.
Thank you, Anne Marie, and might as well keep your mic open because I'm going to check in with Trent there.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks, everybody. I want to acknowledge yesterday's kind of consensus on range riding. That was encouraging, but I struggled today with the discussion today. It doesn't seem like there's ever really an opportunity to provide input kind of from a professional level or from the scientific end of things. You know, like some things get said as if they're fact and we just kind of chug right past it. And that really concerns me. I think it might just be the structure of these online team meetings, but I struggled with it. And I'm an action-oriented person, and we spent pretty much this whole meeting today just talking about the term chronic conflict zones, but not really any time talking about why they might be occurring or what's going on there and what we might be able to do about it. So at the end of today, I don't know what we have to show for what we did. So I'm kind of bummed.
All right. Thank you, Trent. Dave?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for 2 hard days. I kind of agree with the last speaker. We never seem to get to causation. I guess I'm no longer Dogwood Dave. I'm Delusional Dave, and I'll sign out at that.
All right, Dave, thank you very much. Tom?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tom.
So I just want to start out by saying thank you to everybody for the time commitment the last day and a half. I am thankful for what we were able to accomplish yesterday. You know, I just don't think today's discussion and kind of delving into chronic conflict zones was teed up or set up properly for us. And I'm not pointing any fingers. I just think as we got into it, I just didn't feel like we had done enough conversation. And Trent, your comments, I agree with. I mean, I would like to hear more from staff on this concept and what staff is thinking we need to do to move forward, and just giving that more time for that conversation, which certainly worked a whole lot better when we could sit around in the U and look at each other and have a conversation. It's just harder in this concept. And then Paul, I just want to thank you too for your patience and guidance from where we started to where we ended up. I thought that was very helpful and really do appreciate that. So thanks everyone. Appreciate your patience and commitment to this process.
Thank you, Tom. Diane?
Thanks, everyone. I know it's a super busy time for everybody, and I really honor the fact that we all still come to the table. So really glad we got the stuff done yesterday. We got done. I also felt a little uncomfortable as we were talking about things that I felt as though someone needed to jump in to talk about the science, or there needed to be a professional voice there, and I wasn't sure what was appropriate. So that would be an interesting process discussion maybe later. And then I just wanted to thank Sammy, Lynn, and Lisa, and whatever department staff person will be assigned to this committee. Thank you very much for your time and being willing to do that. I think that helps move us forward. And thank you, Paula, for your leadership with that.
Thank you, Diane. Jess? Jess, if you're talking, we don't hear you. All right, I'll come back to you, Jess. Paula.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what was said about, you know, it was kind of a hard discussion today to feel like we made progress, but hopefully we're setting ourselves up to. But I would really like that staff discussion or like there being time to hear from staff. And I'm not quite sure how that works with timing in terms of having the subgroup go away and work on language without the benefit of that discussion. So maybe that's just something to think about. But I've been thinking a lot about the public comments both yesterday and today. And, you know, clearly there's an enormous amount of frustration out there. And, you know, I've never had the opportunity to participate in a group like the WAG before and be able to civilly listen to each other and, you know, hear what the issues are and actually, you know, make progress on coming to agreements. And that's an amazing process. But I also think if you are on the outside looking in, I can see why that's not very satisfying. And so I just want to just toss out there for general consideration, both for us and for the department staff of, you know, maybe figuring out a way to restructure how we get input from the public. So that's one idea. I don't know what that looks like, but structure it in a way where people feel like their input is being taken or they're actually being heard. But then I also just recognize that there's some structural limitations to that. You know, the big picture mission of the WAG has been to advise the department on implementation of the Wolf Plan that was done in 2011. And the Wolf Plan clearly has legal control as a tool. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to implement that. And for myself personally, I try to figure out a way to have input on that protocol to minimize when lethal control happens. And then, like I stated yesterday, my organization is all about getting resources on the ground to help ranchers and in that way also minimize lethal control. But there's clearly a chunk of the population for which that's not good enough, right? And so I don't know how to solve that, but I also don't think it's good to have all of this anger bubbling up and us moving along as if we don't hear it. And on the other side, I'm sure there are ranchers who are also don't feel satisfied with us and, want to see lethal control faster or other things. And, we are working in this amazing middle space to come up with reasonable solutions. But when there's parts of the population that don't feel satisfied with that, that's going to boil over somehow. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I wanted to acknowledge the members of the public who aren't satisfied with what they hear and see from us, and maybe have us all think about if there's some other way we can broaden the discussion.
Thank you, Paula. Candace?
I would, echo, I really want to make sure, just kind of like what Anne Marie said, that we get this language for the chronic conflict down, and not kind of like sometimes how we normally do, where it's at the very last minute, and that doesn't give enough time for us to figure out how to implement that, and producers and others and range riders to kind of help out with that. So I think my main focus is to make sure that we're working on that language. And I did volunteer for the group, but unless, internally we have a different idea who that should be. But other than that, great job yesterday. I'm looking forward to wrapping this one up too.
Thank you, Candace.
Hey, Candace, sorry, I didn't see that. So I didn't know you volunteered. My bad.
No worries.
And Lynn.
Well, I do appreciate everyone's efforts and input. I'll be honest, I'm disappointed that we couldn't come to some kind of closure on the chronic conflict zones, even the language or the semantics, as one member of the public mentioned, because I think we're going to have the same outcome this year of, depredations and more wolves being killed in those high conflict areas. And there's going to be a lot of unhappy people in Washington. My unofficial constituents will not be happy with more wolves being killed. And I'm not saying it's okay for more cattle to be killed either. I just think the whole cycle needs to be addressed. So I look forward to working with the other WAG members on coming up with some language, and hopefully we can do that in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Bill?
Well, I'm really pleased with our being able to come to a consensus yesterday, but it took many meetings of discussion, and I think the conflict zones are going to do the same thing. It'll come together after we have a lot of discussions, and we'll probably get something solved pretty soon. I really appreciate the diversity of views from everybody, because every time somebody that has a different view than me speaks, it causes me to rethink what I'm thinking and to help look for solutions in there. I really appreciate that. And I really hope things situation changes so that we can actually have a real meeting in Spokane. 3 months away, but I'm looking forward to having a meeting without having to drive for half a day or more. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So overall, I thought today was a tough day from the standpoint of I thought that the chronic conflict zone discussion, it felt to me that the group struggled with some of the things that we talked about yesterday from the standpoint of kind of the overall foundation of WAG and WAG processes and things that had been discussed with a direction chosen. And I thought some of that got revisited today. It felt a little bit like we were heading backwards. But then I reminded myself of sometimes you take a step back to go forward. And then Bill, having just gone before me, Bill's attitude, there's an old silly joke that I will tell the group because Bill just sort of made me think about that. And it's the one about the giant pile of horse manure. And it's the little boy with the shovel who is so excited about that giant pile of horse manure. And he's digging and digging and digging and digging. And his parents come out and say, "What are you doing?" And he says, "With this much poop, there's got to be a pony down there somewhere." And that's Bill. And Bill, I appreciate your perspective. You're a really positive guy. Appreciate your perspective. You've always got something positive to say.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, are you still with us? I don't think so. I don't see Greg. All right. Katie, how have you held up this day?
Good. Yeah, I feel like over the past 2 days, being the note taker for WAG, I've got to learn a lot and know about you folks that do so much great work for not only the department, but for the public. So thank you for all you do. And I look forward to being able to potentially be your note taker in the future.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate you being here. Sammy?
Yeah, I appreciate Donnie's comments kind of directed towards some of the public comment. We try really hard in this group to be respectful of each other, and then public comment happens and we get attacked. And I think all sides maybe felt like they got attacked a little bit through public comment. I don't think that's just quite fair. I will agree with the public a little bit that there needs to be the seats filled. But that means there's going to be another producer added too, because there's a producer seat that's empty. So I would like to see the department go ahead and fill those seats. There are some members that can't participate every time, and you know that is what it is. But that leaves us as a group sometimes down to a skeleton. More participation this meeting maybe than last, it felt like. But and then I guess another kind of, I do feel bad for the department employees a bit. They seem to get attacked on all sides, and that's not fair to get attacked by us as producers, the environmentalist community. That you guys seem to get attacked a little bit from all sides, of everybody feeling like you're not doing your job as far as managing. And I think that just goes to show how much more improvement that there is on a subject such as wildlife management. And we also have to realize through this, not everybody's going to be happy. We do come to a consensus agreement through the WAG process, but it doesn't mean that everybody is going to agree on every subject every time. It's just not how we're meant to work. It's not how this group was chosen either. This group was chosen on diverse ideas and perspectives. So it's going to be really hard to reach the consensus of the group with everybody in full agreement. It's just probably not going to happen. There's going to be some give and take through it. I kind of wanted to call out too that it was made in a comment that livestock producers are raising livestock as a business. We are not making our money on a public resource as some other people are, or some of the people that even made that comment. I feel like there's people that have made comment that are literally making their living off of wolves' existence, and that's a public resource. At least the livestock is a privately owned entity. And I realize that's kind of off subject, but it's something that has just really touched me and pushed me a little bit through this process, and having to sit there and listen to it. And they have to sit there and listen to us make the comment back. So I realize there's a lot of give and take to it, but something that I guess just kind of fires me a little bit. So I am glad that we are done with range riding. I'm glad that we're moving on to chronic conflict. I echo Lynn's sentiment. Let's not make this take forever, but it's something that we're not going to agree on readily. So it's something that is going to take a little bit of time. So I hope that we can get that done. I don't know if there's something else in the protocol that we need to address after that, or whether that means we move on to the post-delisting plan or not. But I think we're going to work hard at that. And one question is, what were the dates for the November meeting?
Okay, those dates were 18th and 19th, with the caveat Tom might have his annual meeting, so I don't know if that helps you or hurts you.
I just didn't write them down.
And I'll send them out to the team again.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sammy. Dan, Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I had comments sort of in my head, but thanks, Sammy, for that. I really appreciate what you're saying there. That kind of changes my direction. So first of all, really appreciate us coming together yesterday and finding agreement on range riders and responsibilities. I think that really is something that we should be proud of. I also agree that I think it was set up today, wasn't set up very well for success with chronic conflict zones. Kind of came in sort of contentious from the start, but there is a sense that I get that we do want to see this through. There's sort of buy-in on all sides, and so what concerns me right now is that we just didn't really spend enough time to figure out what our sort of policy or what our agreements are as far as sort of holding the like a date or a limit to discussions and making decisions. That's still sort of out there. We touched upon it, but we didn't really come to any sort of agreement on any nuts and bolts to that. So current conflict zones, we have 7-8 months before next season, and I'm just asking the group to sort of, let's honor that. Let's not let this go another year. Let's do the hard work and find that consensus, because it's time goes by very fast, and we're all busy, but this is so incredibly important for stakeholders across the board. So I would just ask that we remember that and do our work and then make a decision like we did yesterday. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And then Jess, I wanted to give another chance to see if we can hear from you.
Sorry, I had to step away for a minute, but
oh, sure.
Yeah, I support the timeline deal best we can. We gotta. Obviously, if we don't get it done, I'd rather have it done right than done fast, obviously. But if we can get it done in a timely manner, that'd be great.
Thank you, Jess. All right, did I miss anybody? Well, thank you all again. Thanks for your time, your work, your respectfulness, and I wish you all a great day, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Rob.